Well, my spookies, it's your good buddy and narrator Hnrique Couto, here with one more special, malicious marathon of holiday horror to make sure you're having a very scary Christmas. I hope you've been enjoying these marathons as well as all the new content dropping all through the holiday season. We love a good scare, but especially during the holidays. Something to take your mind off the hustle and bustle, the stress of preparing meals or buying gifts or missing a loved one. That's why we do this show, to bring you a little escape from whatever it is that ails you. So, get comfortable, relax, have something nice and warm to drink as we enjoy these 6 terror tales, and it all starts at the Psych Ward. Xmas at the Psych Ward by Bruce Haney. It was snowing that Christmas Eve, but this didn't bring joy to Caleb because he had been sitting in the psych ward for the last couple of weeks after a failed suicide attempt. He had expected to see his parents that night, but the recent snowstorm had kept them away. He had been surprised that the facility did celebrate the holidays. There was a tree decorated in the common area as well as other non-Christian themed holiday decorations. There were even gifts that had been delivered a few days earlier for the guests who were stuck there with no family visiting them. Guests is the term this particular hospital likes to use to refer to their patients. Being a guest was supposed to indicate that you were there temporarily. This was true for most, but not for all the people at Sumter Behavioral Health Center. Caleb was scheduled to be released in a few days, but he wasn't planning on making it through the night. He had pleaded his case to be let out before Christmas. He didn't want to end his life in a hospital. "I'm not like the other crazy people in here. I'm normal," he had pleaded. The term crazy is not accepted around here, and I am pressed to remind you that attempting to take one's life is not the act of a normal mind. His psychiatrist had responded. "It is when you've had the year that I have," Caleb told her. Caleb had always been a bit dramatic, but he was not exaggerating. His year had been truly awful. The first bad thing to happen was that he lost what he considered to be the love of his life. His name was Kyle, and he was a bit out of Caleb's league. While Caleb worked part-time at a failing video game store, Kyle was moving up the ranks at his job and heading toward management. Kyle was also a real looker. Caleb wasn't a slob or ugly, but he was nowhere near as attractive as Kyle. This difference in prospects and his low self-esteem made Caleb resent Kyle, and this resentment led to negativity and jealousy, which created a wedge in their friendship. A wedge that was just big enough for a man named Jacob to squeeze into. Caleb understood this in a way that only a person with poor self-esteem can. Jacob was a 10 and owned a condo before the age of 30. Of course I couldn't compete with that. Who could? Caleb had told his friend Sarah over coffee. "You'll find someone else," she said, trying to console him. "Sure, but he was the one. He was the love of my life, and I'll never, ever be that happy again," Caleb whined. It was hard for Sarah to not roll her eyes at him. Sarah was a little older than he was and a bit wiser. "It's going to be hard," she said. "There will be other guys out there. Not like Kyle, but think of it this way. You could get to fall in love again." "How exciting is that?" Sarah finished. "I don't want to," Caleb told her. "Of course you do. You've always been a romantic. You're going to have more first dates. You get to experience that awkward moment of holding hands for the first time, kisses goodnight, and strange bedfellows," She told him and gave him an exaggerated wink. "Are you talking about my prospects or yours?" Caleb asked, then laughed. Sarah could always make him feel better. They had been best friends since he was a junior and she was a sophomore. Her death 2 months later by a drunk driver was harder on him than losing Kyle. Those events happened before summer, and by the time Christmas came around, he had lost his job, had his car stolen, and totaled by his insurance company. Not because it was wrecked, but because 2 people were found smoking meth and fentanyl inside of it. He didn't have full coverage, so he was out of a vehicle. To cap it off, like a lyric from a sad country song, even his damn dog ran away. The one Kyle had brought home for their 2nd anniversary. Even before this awful year, Caleb had been depressed. He was a cutter, but still, everyone was shocked when he tried to take his life by slashing his wrists. At the health center, he didn't have access to razor blades, so he was going to make a noose out of the sheet from his bed. Before attempting to take his life, he decided to see what the other guests were doing in the common room. This decision to be social possibly saved his unwanted life. Less than an hour later, the killings would begin. Some of the other guests suffered from depression like Caleb, and some others had other mental challenges that they were going through. But one guest, unbeknownst to the others, was a full-blown homicidal maniac. It was getting late, but a couple of other guests were sitting in the common room watching an old black and white Christmas movie. "Hey, Caleb," John said passively. Caleb liked him okay enough as long as John didn't start talking about politics. "Merry Christmas, Caleb," Ethan said to him. Caleb thought Ethan was a good kid. Sadly, he too was a cutter, and a failed suicide attempt is what landed him in the hospital as well. Though Ethan did admit in group that he didn't want to die. I don't know, I couldn't stand it. I was so invisible to them, I thought if I died, they would care. They couldn't ignore me if they were planning my funeral, Ethan was saying, but was interrupted by, "You pussy," another guest named Tim had said, and then laughed. John had been there too, and laughed. Caleb felt for the kid, and that was why he kicked Tim's chair over, which also didn't help his case for being released before Christmas. When Tim fell to the ground, Mark, another patient who never spoke, started laughing and continued to do so while Tim and Caleb were separated and escorted out. This annoyed Tim, and he screamed at him, "Shut the fuck up, Mark!" Mark continued to laugh to the point that everyone felt unnerved by it. He was laughing because he knew when he started his massacre, Tim would be first. "Merry Christmas, Ethan. How are you doing tonight?" Caleb asked before sitting down in the common area. "I'm doing okay. I wish I was at home. This would have been my last Christmas to spend living at my parents' house," Ethan said. "Yeah? Where do you expect to be next year?" Caleb asked. "University of Oregon," Ethan said. "You're going to college?" Caleb asked. "Well, my parents are paying for it, and I have the grades, and since the whole killing myself thing didn't work out, I should build myself a future," Ethan told Caleb. "You are much smarter at your age than I was, or am now. If I thought like you, I might not be spending my Christmas here with the likes of you two. No offense," Caleb said, and then laughed. John and Ethan laughed too. During their conversation, a nurse named Rob walked into the room. They thought they were going to be told to get to their own rooms, but he made a note of how many guests were in the common area. A few minutes later, Rob walked in with a tray with 4 mugs. "The usual suspects," he said while he handed them each a cup of hot chocolate. The three looked up at him with a questioning look. "Merry Christmas. I wanted to do something nice. It's Christmas Eve after all. Some of you guests don't deserve a treat. Some of you are a pain in my ass," Rob said, and then took a drink from his cup. "John, you borderline don't deserve a treat, but you're with good company, so you can reap their reward. It is Christmas and all," Rob said. "It's just hot chocolate. You're not sucking our dicks. Don't feel so high and mighty giving us a 50-cent cup of cocoa," John said. "I can take it back," Rob said calmly, not letting John get to him. No, sorry. Thank you. Merry Christmas," John said. They all sat quietly after that, drinking their hot chocolate and watching the old Christmas movie. Then they heard the screaming.
More scares to come. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Rob was the first up, and the first to run down the hall to find out what was going on. Billy, the other nighttime nurse, came out from the office and beat him to the room. Inside was an older gentleman named Ed, who had been in and out of places like this his whole life. He had a bit of a violent past, always attacking the people close to him, but never enough to do actual jail time. Ed was screaming because his roommate, Tim, was lying in his bed, with his throat slit and his face slashed all up. Rob was the senior nurse there and quickly took charge of the situation. "What happened here? Who did this?" Rob asked. "I don't know. He was like this when I came back from the bathroom," Ed said. "John, Caleb, Ethan, back to your rooms. Caleb, take Ed with you, and none of you let anyone except for the two of us in. Billy, go back to the office and call 911. I'll look for the killer," Rob ordered. "What if he tries to attack you?" Billy asked. "I've been taking self-defense classes for years. Do you think I would work here around these crazies without some way of protecting myself?" Rob asked. "Right," Billy said. "You haven't been taking classes like I told you, have you?" Rob asked. "Well, Billy stammered. "You fucking rookie. Just get to the damn phone, Billy," Rob shouted. Billy ran off and John, Ethan, Ed, and Caleb stared at Rob. "Get to your rooms, now," Rob said. They all turned and left. Rob yelled after them. "Sorry for saying crazies. Don't tell my boss, please." Rob then went on down the hall to look for signs of the killer. John went to his room. The doors could only be locked with a key, so he decided that he would push his bed up against the door. He didn't know that the killer was hiding under his bed, and as soon as he got close enough, he heard snickering. And then, before he could react, a hand with a stolen kitchen knife stabbed through his left shoe. The cheap hospital-issued shoes did nothing to hinder the blade, though it did keep his now severed middle two toes close to where they had once belonged. John then fell to the floor, and the killer took the opportunity to slash his throat. As the blood sprayed, Mark laughed harder and harder. Billy heard the laughter, but before he could make it out of his office, the killer was there. "Happy holidays," Mark said. Once Billy was taken care of, Mark went to the next phase of his plan. He knew that the landline phone was dead. He had severed it hours ago. He knew which line it was because he had severed it months earlier when he first came up with the plan. Everyone had made a big stink about it. A technician had to come out and fix it, and they lost dessert for 2 days since no one would admit to cutting the line. Once in the office, the killer found what he hoped he would find in there. Both nurses' cell phones, charging. He had made a mental note after weeks of watching their patterns that it was around this time each night that they plugged their phones in to charge after a shift's worth of TikTok watching and Instagramming. He acted quickly and methodically. He took each phone and shoved his knife through the screens. He then took the useless landline phone and smashed it against the server equipment that provided internet to the building. With that done, he looked around the room for other opportunities to add to his chaos. He didn't find much, but hanging on the coat rack, he saw something that he hoped he would find. He laughed the whole time as he grabbed the Santa Claus costume off the rack and put it on. The plan was going better than he had imagined. Luck was on his side. Caleb had dragged Ethan and Ed to his room. Caleb's roommate was sitting up in bed. "What the fuck is going on out here?" Steve yelled. Steve was at the health center because he attempted to light his former workplace on fire because he didn't receive a Christmas bonus. He didn't quite understand that former employees don't typically get Christmas bonuses. Steve was a bit of a hothead and was fired after he threw his boss's world's best boss mug at his own boss's head. "People are getting killed, Steve. That is what the fuck is going on," Caleb explained. "For real?" Steve asked Ed. Ed was older and Steve trusted him. Ed shook his head up and down. This calmed Steve down. "Who?" Steve asked. "Tim, at least. His throat was slashed," Ed said. "I've heard 2 other screams since. I think possibly Billy too," Caleb added. "Fuck. Tim got out in a couple of days, not that he wanted to. Billy was kind of a prick though," Steve finished. "Don't speak ill of the dead," Ethan whispered. "Is Rob okay?" Steve asked. Rob was a good guy. He had to make everyone follow the rules, but he did it in a respectful way, and he was respected for it. "As far as we know," Caleb said. At that moment, Rob had returned to the main corridor, not finding any signs of the killer. Rob wished there was more staff there. Billy and himself were it. Usually there were another 2, but the holidays were always light. The staff wanted to be home with their families, and each year many guests were released early to make that possible. As soon as Rob made it back to the guest wing, he heard the laughter. And then, the killer in the stolen Santa Claus outfit stepped out of the office. "What are you doing?" Rob asked. The killer just laughed. Are you wearing my Santa Claus outfit?" Rob asked. For the last 4 years, Rob had worn that costume every Christmas morning at the facility. Every year, the guests would make fun of him for it. But he could tell from some that they did appreciate the effort. The killer didn't respond to his first question, so he asked another. "What's going on in here?" Rob asked. No response. "Did you kill Tim?" Rob asked. The killer shook his head, yes, then made a cross with his 2 index fingers. Rob was confused until the killer then held up 2 fingers. "You killed 2 others?" Rob asked. The killer laughed, then decided to sprint towards Rob while pulling out the knife that he had tucked into the waistband of the Santa suit. "Get away from me!" Rob yelled. Back in Caleb's room, they had been listening to the exchange, and when they heard the killer go after Rob, without even thinking, Ethan pushed open the door. Caleb followed, stopping just long enough to grab a chair. Without knowing it, they were directly in the killer's path, who immediately adjusted his aim and went to stab Ethan. Caleb pushed Ethan out of the way. Ethan fell to the floor and rolled away unscathed. Caleb wasn't as lucky. The killer slashed the knife at him, cutting his wrist. Caleb watched as the blood from his arm hit the polished floor, and for a moment was taken back to a few weeks ago when he was the one spilling his blood. It was a weird sensation. Caleb didn't feel scared. He felt violated. Cutting his wrist was something he did, not something that was done to him. Caleb was filled with anger and swung the chair at the pseudo-Santa as hard as he could. Then again, the killer held his arms up to protect himself from the blows, and then ran away. Once the killer was gone, Caleb looked over to Rob. "You okay?" he asked. Rob and Ethan looked him up and down. He was bleeding heavily, and they just witnessed him going primal while beating on the killer. "Are you okay?" Rob asked. "I'm fine," Caleb said while taking his hand and rubbing his hair back. Blood dripped onto his face. Caleb then held out his arm and looked at the cut again. "Maybe not," Caleb said. Rob ran off and moments later was back with a full first aid kit. If you're going to get attacked, let it be in a hospital-type situation. Their first aid kits are usually well stocked. A moment after Rob finished fixing him up, the lights went out. "He must have gotten to the breaker box," Rob said cheerfully. "Why is that good?" Ethan asked. "The box is located in the stairwell at the end of the west hallway," Rob said while he got up and started walking. "And?" Caleb asked. "He's far enough away that it should be safe to go to my office and grab a flashlight and call the police, if Billy hasn't already," Rob said. In the office, the three of them felt around for anything that could be a weapon. Rob eventually found a flashlight in a drawer. When he turned it on, it revealed that the stuff they were walking in was blood. The flashlight also helped them see where the blood had come from. Some was from Billy's lifeless body, while the rest came from Billy's head, which had been cut off and thrown onto the desk with little to no regard.
You're not safe yet. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
With the flashlight, it was also easy to find the useless phone. Rob then went for his own, which he found next to Billy's. Both destroyed. Okay, don't panic, Rob said to himself. If we can get to the breaker and turn it back on, we can use a computer to reach out to the police. There has to be a way to do that, right? Rob asked the two. Caleb frowned and pointed to the modem and the internet equipment that had been destroyed. What are we going to do? Ethan asked. I don't know. We could try to grab the others and then run outside, but we're 2 miles from anything and it's snowing pretty heavily outside, Rob said. Maybe we could just hide, Ethan suggested. Or we could all come out into the open, Caleb said. You think? Rob asked. I think our strength is in our numbers, which we won't have if we don't act quickly. It's easy for him to take us out one by one, but when he attacked and there were 3 of us there, we walked away. Scathed, but we did walk away, Caleb explained. The 3 of them walked back to Caleb's room to grab Steve and Ed. You have to come with us, Caleb told them. I ain't going nowhere. We're safe in this room, Ed said. Do you think so? How do you think Tim was killed? In one of these rooms. We need to band together, and we need a spot where we have room to fight, Caleb explained. Caleb was persuasive, and as a group, they went to each room looking for other survivors. They found John's dead body in one room. They found 2 other dead guests, each with a pillow over their head, so they couldn't scream. He was going room to room, Rob said. Maybe he's back in one, snuck back to them when we were in the office, and now he's just waiting to jump out and stab one of us in the throat, Ed said. So we stay away from the rooms, Ethan said. No, Caleb replied. Then what? Ed asked. We lock them, Rob explained, understanding what Caleb was getting at. Every one of them, Caleb finished. They went methodically down the corridor, locking the doors with Rob's keys. After each door was locked, one of them would put their ear and listen for any sign of life. Nothing was heard until they locked the second-to-last door. Ethan then put his ear to the door and heard a noise inside that he couldn't make out. "Someone's in this room," Ethan whispered to the rest of them. "Whose room is that?" Steve asked. "It's been empty. Has been for a week," Rob said. "Then it has to be the killer," Caleb replied. "Let's get him then," Ed said. "It's safer to just lock him up. There's no exit from that room," Rob explained. Then, the last door that they were about to check flung open. Ed was the closest to the door, so he was the one to be stabbed by the killer in the Santa Claus suit. "To the common room!" Rob yelled. When the killer pulled out his knife, Caleb grabbed Ed and dragged him. Ed was screaming, "Don't leave me!" The killer followed and continued to stab poor Ed with every step they made. Eventually, Ed's body went limp, and there was nothing for Caleb to do but drop it. The killer then swung his knife at Caleb, just barely missing his throat. "Why are you doing this?" Caleb yelled. The killer laughed. "Mark?" Caleb asked. The killer swung his knife at Caleb again. He had to run to the common room after that, and by the time he got there, the others had gathered what weapons they could find, which wasn't very much. Ethan was smart and grabbed the nutcracker that was out as a Christmas decoration. Rob was practical and grabbed a chair, while Steve yielded the heaviest Christmas package he could find under the tree, which wasn't all that heavy. To get away from the attack, Caleb ran behind the tree. Rob swung the chair, which the killer grabbed with his free hand. Rob looked at the killer, shocked that his knife-wielding Santa Claus was able to stop the chair's momentum with only one hand. Rob thought that's not just strength. That is the power of being truly crazy. The killer then put the knife in his pocket and grabbed the chair with his other hand and made moves to fling Rob. Steve made his way over to hit the killer Santa with the package, but this had little effect. Ethan had better luck, smacking him on the shoulder with the heavy wood nutcracker. The killer screamed out in pain and dropped his hold on the chair. While this was going on, Caleb was trying to figure out what he could do to help the situation. And finally, he found his weapon of choice. It was unconventional, to say the least. Caleb grabbed the wreath that hung on the wall and waited for an opportunity, which came suddenly after Ethan hit the killer another time in the head. The killer responded by pulling his knife back out and slashing Ethan across the chest. He then turned around and ran. Caleb was furious as he thought about the future that young Ethan could have once he was out of there. Caleb ran after him and put the wreath over the killer's head, and then used it to swing him into the wall, repeatedly. During the struggle, the killer stabbed Caleb in the thigh, but Caleb hardly noticed. Eventually, the killer went limp from his head, repeatedly hitting the wall. Caleb then grabbed the knife from the killer's lifeless body. He was still furious and made moves to turn the killer over to slash his throat. Rob was taking care of Ethan's wounds during this, and Steve walked over to watch. But Caleb was no killer and had a change of heart. "I can't do it," Caleb said. And then he stood up to check on Ethan. "He's gonna make it. He just barely nicked him," Rob told him. "Give me your keys," Caleb said. Rob unhooked them from the loop on his pants and threw them to Caleb. "I think he's dead, but just in case we should lock him up," Caleb explained to Steve. Steve and Caleb then each grabbed a side of the wreath that was around his neck and dragged him to the room where they had heard the sound. Caleb handed the keys over to Steve to unlock it, and Caleb held the knife out, just in case. When they opened the door, they heard what had been making the sound inside. The music came from a radio. Caleb and Steve laughed, then dragged the killer into the room. Momentarily, they were distracted as the song faded down and the radio DJ came on. Well, here we are. It's 12:01 and it's officially Christmas. Merry Christmas to all of you KWHG listeners. Hope you were good and didn't make it onto Santa's naughty list. This is your pal, Big Bobby, and the Christmas classics are going to keep on a-coming. Here's Deck the Halls, he said. And the song began. That was the moment that the killer tried to leap up and grab the knife back from Caleb. Without thinking, Caleb stabbed him in the throat. The killer stared at him, with hatred in his eyes. Caleb then twisted the blade, and a moment later, all life left the killer. Steve reached down and pulled off the beard and hat to reveal what Caleb had already figured out. It was Mark, who would never laugh his crazy laugh again. With that done, Caleb got up, walked over to the radio, and turned up the volume. As they walked back to Ethan and Rob, the song continued. During the struggle of the night, Caleb couldn't wait for it to be over, for everybody to be safe, so he could go back to his room and kill himself. And now that he had the killer's knife, he was more prepared than before. He was originally going to hang himself with his sheet, but now that it was over, he just wanted to check on his friends. He had seen enough death. It had been a terrible year, but fighting for his and other people's lives made Caleb finally see value in life. So, he let go of the knife, and it fell to the floor. Christmas at Pendleton Station by Rob Fields. I have had much time to ponder things since my birth on October 31st, 2099. First, I would awaken in a crypt and leave it to find my way to what was once the village of Strickfield. I would only get to learn very little there since I was attacked and captured by a cowardly despot named Sarathos, who would prove to be my first challenge. After defeating him and freeing several organic women whom he captured for an offering to Hellweaver, I received new mission files. Currently, I'm en route to the Pendleton Way station. Bear in mind that this destination is not part of the village of Pendleton itself. There is a vital component that I must acquire for when I reach my destination in Shore City upon completion of my other mission objectives. I should have arrived at Pendleton Way Station many days ago. Shortly after I began my journey, I was forced to engage a pack of werewolves in battle. After defeating them, I continued on with my journey. Nearly a week later, I determined that the sun would rise again and needed to seek shelter. I found an abandoned dwelling and waited the seemingly endless day out. I would have to be with patience since I recalled in a former life that sunlight was deadly to me. The day began on the second week of November and lasted nearly a month. Fortunately, I do not require sustenance the way organic beings do. However, I would require plant-based nutrition in order to maintain my skin base. Descending the basement, I discovered many bottles of vintage wine. Scanning the bottles, I determined the wine to be quite suitable and gradually consumed it. When Earth had finally moved to where the sun would finally set, I was able to finally leave the dwelling and continue on my journey. I walked many desolate roads and through dense forests until I would reach the railroad tracks that I required. I had not walked a mile upon the tracks when a snowstorm began. The winds would remind me of my birth in that crypt on Halloween night. According to my internal clock, The day is December 21st, 2099. Unfortunately, these random weather patterns and long days and nights happened as a result of the Hellweaver Holocaust of October 31st, 2030. Hellweaver was victorious against the Battle Guard who opposed her and conquered the multiverse using the reality sphere. She only proved victorious because one of the Battle Guard turned against her allies and joined Hellweaver. With the epicenter of the Hellweaver Holocaust being upon this world, the goddess herself unleashed the power of the reality sphere. It was this event that forever altered Earth's axis. Thanks to my advanced software, I am able to determine how long the days, nights, and weather patterns will last. The night shall last until the first hours of December 25th, 2099. That shall be sufficient time for me to reach the Pendleton Way Station. This is the first time that I have experienced winter weather since my birth. I can feel the cold in the wind and the snow. No organic being of this world could endure these conditions without suitable clothing. Organics would look upon me and determine that I am not adequately dressed for these conditions myself. However, I am a machine. My skin base retains its softness and composition in spite of the negative temperatures. Even my long metallic blonde hair remains dry and shiny. My clothing is quite wet, however. Nevertheless, I continue my journey and enjoy this change in the weather. Before, the weather was rainy. With the onset of the winter, the rain has become snow. Just as I do not require sustenance, I do not require rest. My power core provides me with limitless energy. Again, I find myself wondering why the life I feel was placed into this metallic body. I have had many days to ponder the meaning of my very existence when I was in that dwelling awaiting for the sun to descend. I was given the memories, appearance, and powers of a vampire Trelander hybrid named Cecilia Tabon. However, the memories are currently incomplete. By my calculations, I have 87% of her total memories. The remaining memories were likely lost when her body was left to decompose in that crypt for 212 years. Upon analyzing the memories used to give me data to feed my limitless intelligence capacity, I am unable to quickly reconstruct the necessary algorithms to fill the gaps. When it comes to the vampire half of Cecilia Tabon, I do not possess many of the powers that she once had, such as the ability to transmorph. I believe this is because of the composition of my indestructible metallic form that my skin base conceals. I regard the wintry sky and see only the barrier that is the clouds which produce the great winds and the seemingly endless snow across the lands. Why am I alive? I ask. I know that my mission is in my databanks, but yet I do not understand why I was born as a single machine who must live among a multitude of organics. Only the harsh winds respond, though they do not give me the answers that I seek. All I have is my mission. I must accomplish several side objectives before reaching Shore City and fulfilling the final objective there. My ultimate objective will be to engage in battle with Hellweaver and use all the power at my disposal to prevent her from creating this multi-universal hell, even at the cost of my own brief existence. I maintain my present course. When the snow becomes too high for me to be able to continue walking, I must make calculated jumps. This weather shall not prevent me from reaching my first objective. The days and hours mean nothing to me. It is into December 25th, 2099 when I finally reach the outskirts of the Pendleton Way Station. Scanning it, it has the appearance of a fortress. A high wall protects the dwellings and the few inhabitants within. The main gate is just ahead. As I am ready to jump over the wall, the main gate unlocks and begins to open. It does not open all the way, however. 2 organic males come through the opening and approach me. Both are armed with weapons. "You need to go away from here at once," the left one says. "If you stay, you'll only endanger yourself and all of us," the right one adds. I scan both of them to determine that they are no match for me. My empathic abilities tell me they are with great fear. How would there be an endangerment to either myself or you? I inquire. Now the two of them regard me with confusion. Don't you know what Christmas Day brings? The left man asks. If I knew, I would not need to inquire, I return. The men regard one another for a moment. Then the left man gently says, We will bring you inside so you may warm yourself, but we fear none of us shall be safe once he comes. Once who comes? I inquire. Please tell me. Once we're inside, the right man insists. Very well, lead the way. I shall follow you. The men turn back to the way station entrance and go inside. I follow close behind. Seeing the inside, it looks very much like a colony with basic places for commerce, lodging, a restaurant, a general store, and a communications office. My objective for the Pendleton Way Station highlights. I am required to obtain a vital component here, and cannot continue my mission without it. Once the main gate is sealed again, I follow the men until I am brought to their leader's building at the center of this colony. We ascend the stairway and enter through the two doors in front. The men take me to their leader himself. The organic man looks up from his desk and sees me. What is the meaning of this? The men who brought me before him explain that they found me outside of their gates. The leader quickly stands to his feet. And you brought her inside? He moves out from behind his desk. It's bad enough we had to send the women and children into hiding. Now you've brought a single female before me? Now the leader turns and regards me. Don't you have suitable clothing, woman? Do not worry about me, I tell him. I wish to know with whom you fear. He sneers now. Truly, woman, you are foolish if you do not know. I have not been in existence for very long, I say. Would there be any harm in telling me? He looks me over. You are a most unusual woman if you've been out in that blizzard and are not affected by it, especially when your clothing is both inadequate and wet. I am not so easily overcome, I assure him. He makes the mistake of glancing to his two men. Suddenly they come at me. Though they are well trained to fight, they are not prepared for one such as I. The men fall before me easily. I do not harm them in any way, since I understand this was merely an exercise to test me. The leader nods. A most unusual woman indeed. He regards his men. Leave us, only stand outside the doors. The men nod and obey him. Now he regards me again. Tell me you've at least heard of Santa Claus. I nod once. I have memories from long ago. Mostly they are photographs, songs, and tales. He has never been in my presence. He is quite real, the leader tells me. May I have your name? I am Cecilia Tabon. And yours? I'm General Reinbold Larst, he returns. I've only been in this highest office for a year tonight. I assumed this rank and office when our last general was struck down by Santa Claus last Christmas. I point to a short stack of blank white paper. May I? You may. I pick up a colored pen and astonish Larst with how quickly I can draw. When I finish, I present him with a rendering of Santa Claus, as the woman who was Grams in a former life had shown me. This man struck your general down? He growls in frustration. Our people may only wish Santa Claus was the jolly old soul of the olden days given your picture. I'd say given your apparent age, you do not know what has become of Santa Claus. Again, will you please tell me that I may understand? I inquire. Larst goes behind his desk and sits. Then he gestures for me to be seated. I obey and await his story. He tells me that Santa Claus was indeed the warm and jolly persona of Christmas. Listening to him and recalling the memories I have of Grams, the stories have few discrepancies. Are you familiar with the Hellweaver Holocaust? He asks. You must at least know that. I do. Does your story begin on October 31st, 2030? I return. Indeed it does. A heavy, sad sigh. When Hellweaver laid waste to our world and altered it for the worst, there were many on this world who couldn't handle the reality of how things would be. It was believed that Santa Claus was one of them. Even though he lived up at the North Pole, the blast wave from the reality sphere even reached his part of Earth. No reason it wouldn't, since she conquered the entire multiverse. He leans forward. Exactly what creatures have you seen for yourself? I tell him that I have regarded many, ranging from werewolves to vampires and zombified organics. Well, you shall soon see Santa Claus for yourself this very night, he states. Every Christmas Eve, he takes to the skies with his monstrous reindeer and mercilessly attacks and kills those unfortunate enough to be seen by him and his reindeer. He's even taken some of the people back to the North Pole to use as his slaves. He mainly attacks and pillages cities, villages, and way stations, such as ours. He lifts my rendering of Santa Claus. This is what we wish he could be again. He puts the rendering down and reaches to a control panel. View the monitor behind me, Tabon. I regard what appears to be footage captured by one or more cameras or scanners. That is Santa Claus now, he tells me. The man wears a red and white suit with a stocking cap, just the same as in my drawing. However, his skin is quite black and his eyes glow hot. If anything, he appears to be greatly zombified. I will not know for certain until I can scan him. He no longer leaves presents for good little boys and girls, Larst says. He doesn't even leave coal for the bad ones. No. I told you what he does. He turns the monitor off. Now the question is, what do you do? I'm not a fool, Tabon. You were somehow able to survive out in that harshest of blizzards, yet you have come all the way out here to Pendleton Way Station. You are not whom you appear to be, or perhaps you're here because you want something. Sensing the man is not malevolent, I take another piece of paper and a pen. I draw what I am here to obtain and present that rendering to him. He regards it for a long moment before he responds to me again. He is with great distrust now. How do you even know about the psionic warp displacer? He asks. Our scientists worked on that in secret for the last several years. Now that we've perfected it, you want to take it from us? I would rather not just take it from you. I would offer you something in trade for it, perhaps. Larst stands and comes around his desk to stand before me. How do you know about our device, Tabon? We know you were nowhere around here when it was first conceived. You would be correct, I agree. Then I stand to face him. What is the psionic warp displacer worth to you? Larst points to his doors. Leave here, immediately. Suddenly, his two men stationed outside the doors enter his office. Sir, the man on the left gasps. We're hearing the bells in the distance. Santa Claus is coming.
More scares to come. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Are you and your men ready for battle? Larst demands. What few we are, sir. The man on the right answers. We fear we shall not survive this conflict. I increase my audio sensors and hear the very jingling bells that the two men have heard themselves. I scan through the walls and see a vessel in the unforgiving skies. It appears to be a large sleigh with what appears to be 9 zombified reindeer pulling it. The single reindeer in the very front has a glowing red nose. I point. This Santa Claus comes from that direction. Larst growls at me. How would you know? I regard him now. How will you hope to defeat this being if he is as powerful as you and your men claim? Larst points at me. I am through talking to you, woman. Leave here now. I raise my finger. I offered you a trade. I shall return outside and engage your Santa Claus in battle. I shall defeat him in exchange for the psionic warp displacer. Larst and his men laugh now. Of course, they do not know that I am a powerful machine. I wait for them to finish. Santa Claus descends, I warn. He shall be within your boundaries very shortly. General Larst, do we have a bargain? He laughs again. If you can do what you claim, then it shall be agreed. Very well. I turn and exit Larst's office. I return to the entrance doors and step outside. The being known as Santa Claus is maneuvering his reindeer over Pendleton Way Station. Then I hear Santa's laughter. I have memories from a former life of Gramps laughing with joy and warmth as Santa would. The laughter I hear now is a menacing, evil one. The laughter is loud enough to be heard even through the harsh winds and snow. "You are a fool, Tabon!" General Larsk calls out from behind me. I glance over my shoulder. "Call your men back, General. They need not risk their lives tonight. I alone shall battle Santa Claus and defeat him, as per our bargain. He shall never be a threat to you again." The general sees that I am serious and issues the order for his men to retreat. "Again, Tabon, you are foolish," Larsk chastises me. "Die well." Then he slams the doors behind me and secures them. I stand and watch Santa Claus as he flies around. In time, his sleigh and zombified reindeer are hovering near the general's building. I scan him and determine that he is perhaps a demon. He is not undead as his reindeer. He looks very much as General Larsk has shown me in his office, regarding how menacing his glowing eyes are. Santa Claus regards me from above and laughs. Again, his menacing, scornful laughter echoes throughout the blizzard. Time to utilize some of my hardware. I raise my voice in response to his laughter, to where he can hear me. "I offer you one chance, demon. Turn away and leave these people in peace. If you do not leave, and you choose to engage in battle with me, you shall fall in defeat. This is my promise to you." Santa Claus and I regard each other for a moment. A long moment. Then he breaks the silence by laughing scornfully at me again. Suddenly, my senses are alerting me to danger. I turn and see many little figures coming over the wall. They laugh and sneer as they scurry towards me. This already reminds me of my first battle against Sarathos. He used his underlings to engage me because he believed me to be too insignificant for him to engage himself. If this demonic entity wishes to see what I'm capable of. Scanning these smaller life forms, they are zombified as the reindeer pulling Santa's sleigh. I'm ready to engage these. I believe Grams referred to these creatures as elves. When the first elf leaps at me, I send it away with a swift blow. With my mechanical accuracy and speed, I send these undead abominations away from me. As many of them as there are, not a single one lays so much as a finger upon me. And no sooner do I dispatch the last one, I feel the demon himself dropping from his sleigh with the intention of landing upon me. When I step aside, Santa Claus lashes out and shoves me upon my back. The demon immediately picks me up and hurls me over the wall. I land hard against a large tree and fall onto my side. I quickly rise again and move to the wall. I leap right over it and see Santa Claus still standing there. I believe he was wondering if I would truly return. I land on my feet and face him. "You shall require much more than that if you hope to overcome me, demon." Santa Claus sneers and launches himself right at me. I await him and catch him this time. As he did to me, I throw him over the wall. I do not await his return, however. I leap over the wall again myself in pursuit of him. I land outside the Pendleton Way station as Santa Claus rises to his feet again. He roars and comes at me. I move and go to him. The two of us engage in a most personal conflict. We throw blow after blow at one another. Truly, Santa Claus is a more formidable foe when compared to Sarathos. Suddenly, Santa Claus grabs me, lifts me off my feet, and drives me into the ground. He lowers himself and throws more deadly blows directly into my face. I throttle his throat and remove him from me as I ascend to my feet. It becomes my turn to throw him into the trees. When Santa Claus hits them, he falls forward. He rises to his feet immediately. He roars, and his eyes glow brighter. I know not what you are, but I shall claim you this night. You shall become the centerpiece of my trophy room, or perhaps I shall make a rug out of your hide. Such empty promises, I mutter. Santa Claus roars and comes at me again. I leap at him in return. We both connect with our blows and find ourselves upon our backs. We both rise and engage one another again. What has become of you? I ask the demon. According to old fables, you used to bring joy to all the good people of this world. Things change, girl. The world changed. The day Hellweaver changed everything. On Halloween night of 2030, when the world became the very essence of hell itself, my wife, my elves, and even my reindeer were slain that night. However, they would not stay dead. You have seen some of my elves and all of my reindeer as they are now. And you? Seeing how the world became and how worse it continues to become, there was only so much I could do. When the blast wave hit, it drove me mad. At the same time, I became this powerful form before you, and now... Who really gives a fuck? He laughs his menacing laughter again. Christmas is my holiday, and on this one night out of the year, I go out and collect that is due to me. But what should concern you now is your doom. My senses alert me to attacks coming from different directions. Santa Claus backs away to watch me engage in battle with all 9 of his reindeer. They all make their undead battle cries as they come at me. These creatures are nearly double the size of normal deer from the memories I possess. Either reindeer are normally this size, or they were affected and altered by the Hellweaver Holocaust, just as Santa Claus himself was. When they come at me, I strike and attack with the same mechanical speed and reflexes as when I earlier repelled the elves. The reindeer are not alone as more of the elves come at me. How many of these small creatures does Santa Claus have? I've had time to experiment and see what I am capable of doing with my new body. I may not know all of my capabilities, but I shall in good time. When I first came to know life, the life force that I was given needed to become fully integrated with my new body. To my understanding, the futuristic alien technology used to create me had to be crafted, configured, and fully optimized to be able to house my spark that is my life. Comparing my own life force to the one that was once Cecilia Tabon, I strive to be all that she never was. I can feel how active my secondary programming is within me. It is this guiding force when working in unison with my emotions that compels me to want to do good. The memories I have that are of the original Cecilia Tabon are not heroic. The Tabon family who took her in as a newborn were heroic. But Cecilia would never strive to become as they were. My software is working to bridge the gaps in the memories with greatly complicated algorithms. This will take a great deal of time and patience for the memories to be fully reconstructed. But knowing that the original Cecilia Tabon was not heroic, and feeling my secondary programming working, I know that I must use what I have been given and become heroic. My ultimate objective is that I must stop Hellweaver, even if it means the end of my brief existence. That means I must not fail against Santa Claus. Again, I am keeping my enemies away from me. Seeing Santa Claus approaching the main gate to the Pendleton Way station, I know that he means to breach it and accomplish his insane objective. His reindeer and elves are a distraction for me. This must end now. When I have an opening, I lean into the air and towards Santa Claus. You shall not be successful in your madness, demon. As I reach Santa Claus, he turns and suddenly plucks me right out of the air. Then he sneers and throws me out into the open where his elves and reindeer suddenly converge and pounce on me. He laughs his horrible, evil laughter again and turns his attention back to the gates. The reindeer and elves are making their noises as they try to keep me down, and attack. The elves have weapons from blades to picks. The reindeer are stomping on me or trying to bite me. My skin base does not easily yield under the pressure of their teeth. These creatures are doing anything and everything to keep me here, while their master uses mighty blows to break open the main gates. He could easily leap over, but he wants to break in, to show the organics inside that the gates are futile. It takes him 3 blows to both force open the gates and make both halves fall. "There shall be no mortals remaining before this night is over. This shall be your last Christmas. Next year, I shall ravage a new destination. In time, I shall decimate all of you remaining mortals. You were foolish to send a weak female to fight your battles for you. Most foolish indeed, and cowardly. Your very existence makes you naughty in my eyes. But I am not finished. It shall take far more than these undead abominations to overcome me. The elves are with distress now as I raise myself to stand. You shall never defeat one such as I declare. Even with your vast numbers, you shall never overcome a machine." I stand once more and knock them away from me, both the elves and the reindeer alike. Killing them will mean nothing since they do not have life within their bodies. Upon repelling enough of them, I turn my attention back to Santa Claus. He is the one I must ultimately defeat. I leap forward and reach him again as he has ripped the main doors away from General Larsk's station. "Will you ever cease your struggle, you worthless mortal female?" he growls. "Not until you're defeated," I return. "Then I shall grant you your death as your final Christmas gift." You shall try. The two of us engage in battle once more. We trade many powerful blows, looking to end each other. Each time that Santa Claus repels me and returns his attention to entering the General Larsk's building, I leap back to him to continue our battle. At times, I am forced to repel elves or reindeer. It is then, when I feel something hit my back, that I was not expecting. I see many variables flashing upon my interface, especially when I am hit again. I regard the reindeer with the bright red nose. From the memories I have with Grams, I believe his name to be Rudolph. He fires his laser beam from his nose and hits my face. I sense injuries and damage to my skin base now. At the same time, I feel my healing factor working to repair the damage. Rudolph fires his laser nose at my face once again.
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
"You are unlike anything I have ever seen," Santa Claus says with disbelief upon seeing half of my true face. Then the demon strikes me hard on the back of my head to send my face into the snow. "Nonetheless, I shall claim you as my prize on this Christmas Day." Suddenly, I'm on my knees. Santa Claus roars and kicks me hard in the chin to make me fly away from him and slam into the wall. I make an indentation and fall forward. Santa Claus is upon me almost at once. He lifts me up, slams me against the wall, and unleashes many powerful blows into me. "You are clearly not a mortal. I know not what you are, but know that you were foolish to think you could best Santa Claus." No matter how powerful he is, he still cannot damage or blemish my mechanical body. I can feel my skin base repairing itself as the gelatinous substance spreads itself on the exposed areas that Rudolph created. I can literally feel my skin base solidifying and becoming my flesh once more. Even my metallic hair is flawlessly regenerated. I technically do not require this exterior skin base and am capable of functioning just as a mechanical being. But my programming maintains my skin and keeps it as a part of me. My creators wished for me to have my exterior covering for specific reasons. Of this, I am certain. I am through letting Santa Claus dominate me in this conflict and know I must end it. When I sense Rudolph firing his red nose at me again, I turn and suddenly feel my own red beams emitting from my very optics and passing through my humanoid eyes. My twin beams conflict with the reindeer's one. I can feel the very power coursing through my body to supplement this power I now utilize. I turn and vampire warp from Santa Claus toward Rudolph. When I land in front of him, I take hold of his unique nose and render it useless. Being undead, the reindeer does not cry out in pain, but he does step away knowing that he can no longer engage in battle with me. And then, when I vampire warp back to Santa Claus again, I can see past him and regard the sun that shall rise again soon. At this point, I do not believe that I shall be able to defeat this monster before the sun fully rises. My life shall come to a very abrupt end once it does. I feel how strong my emotions and my secondary programming are becoming now. If I am to die shortly, then I shall do so knowing that I was successful in keeping Santa Claus from claiming the lives of these and other organics. Santa Claus engages me again. I understand his way of fighting now and am able to counter him. I strike one harsh blow right after another. He staggers backward but still manages to get in a few more attacks on me. Refusing to allow him any more leverage against me, I continue my onslaught and make him stagger. I must defeat Santa Claus before the sun fully rises and destroys me. The sun continues. My emotions continue to rise within me. The demon continues to stagger. Not possible! I continue to show Santa Claus that it is indeed possible. He falls to his knees for me to kick him under his chin and send him upward, make him do a backflip and then land hard on his face and chest. He puts his hands down and raises himself. I step in and keep pummeling him. I am seeing the first rays of the Christmas morning sun as they begin to bring lights to this wintry land. The snow has finally ceased, but the winds continue their vicious onslaught. Then I see what is becoming of the elves and the reindeer, at least the ones that still bear animation. The reindeer walk around fast and make a strange noise. The elves are trying to flee. Even Santa Claus is showing signs of slowing down. The sun is lighting the new morning more now. A strange vapor begins to emit from the reindeer and the elves. I look at Santa Claus and see the vapor rising from him as well. I could run for safety, but this demon's reign of terror must end here. Santa Claus makes one last futile effort to fight me. His blows are at their weakest now. They feel like those of an organic child. I understand immediately. These abominations cannot endure the sunlight and are nocturnal creatures. Now I am with surprise. I gaze upon my skin base and see that nothing is happening to me. I search my memories and recall that the original life form could not exist in the sunlight. She had tried putting her hand in a sunbeam once, only for it to burn her and nearly make her hand burst into flames. No such thing is happening to me now, however. I stand and watch as Santa Claus and his underlings burn in the sunlight. I move away and let them. My optics are primarily on the demon himself. Within my visual scope, I can see the underlings bursting into flames and turning into ash. Santa Claus now bursts into flames himself. He roars as his black flesh flies away from his body to reveal his large, organic skeleton, which is also charred. Perhaps that blast wave from October 31st, 2030 may have been the reason for this. Santa Claus falls flat now as his skeleton is now burning until nothing remains but ash. I look upon the skin base of my own hands and arms to see I'm still intact. Then I remember back in the village of Strickfield when those zombified organics came after me. I also encountered such creatures along the way to this way station. I activate my diagnostics program to see that I have vital signs. I have truly misunderstood the concept of my having life. No, I am not the undead creature that the life form before me was. When it comes to the vampire aspect, I do possess limited powers. I believe that I was undead based upon the memories I have been supplemented with to give me data to feed my intelligence capacity. Cecilia Tabon Being undead was a former life. In my new life, yes, that is indeed what I truly possess within this mechanical body. I have the very essence of true life, the same as these organic beings. Truly, this shall be a Christmas morning to be remembered. I cannot help myself and begin to cry. Wait, how am I capable of tears? I only have a skin base, yet I produce tears of happiness? It is fully morning now. I never need to fear this beautiful sunlight ever again. I feel I am unworthy of life and having a mechanical body. I reason it is my conflicting memories from the past and the new memories I make in the present. After I conclude my crying, I know that it is time for me to see General Lurks and to claim my prize. I walk into his building and soon find him in his office. His 2 men are with him and are armed. Lurks himself regards me. Santa Claus is no more, I tell him. The 3 men regard me for the longest time, then Lurks finally speaks. I cannot allow you to remove the psionic warp displacer from here, he tells me. We had an arrangement, I remind him. Lurks shakes his head. Don't care. We are not relinquishing anything to a woman. I do not recommend forcing me to take it from you, I say. His men raise their weapons. I emit the laser beams from my optics that I used a short time ago and melt their weapons. I also melt General Lurks' weapon after he draws it. The men are with fear and do not know how to react. General Lurks quickly points to a room off to the side. In there. You'll find the psionic warp displacer in a display case. My empathic powers tell me that he does not speak with truth. I utilize my vampire warping power and appear behind Lurks. I lift him off his feet. Remembering the design of the psionic warp displacer, I scan Lurks' office. My optics stop upon his monitor. I lower Lurks and shatter the screen. The component that I require is now before me. I turn to Lurks. Santa Claus sought to end you and your people of this way station. You and your men should be grateful that you will continue to live, even in knowing that he shall never return. Live your lives well while you still have them. Lurks does not listen. Why do you want the psionic warp displacer, woman? I require it for my mission to find and defeat Hellweaver, I answer. It is my mission to make sure this reality never happens and that as few lives are lost as possible. The men are not certain as to what to make of me, but they question me no longer. Lurks steps aside to allow me to take the psionic warp displacer. I scan it to determine that it is genuine. The side objective is now changed to complete. I realize that I cannot just keep this component out in the open. Then I understand and will a small portal to open before me. I place the warp displacer within the field and remove my hand. Shortly after, the portal closes. As I leave Lurks' office, he weakly calls out behind me. You will fail against Hellweaver, Tabon! He shakes his head slowly. I fail to understand how you could defeat Santa Claus. I glance over my shoulder. Beings such as Santa Claus cannot defeat the machine. The men are baffled as I turn and finally take my leave. I walk until I cross through what is left of the gates of Pendleton Way Station. It is time for me to venture to the second side objective, a place where many of the original life force's memories were forged. I must venture to the Tabon homeland known as Ravenhurst. There, I must acquire one of the most powerful and ancient artifacts in the vast Tabon arsenal of weapons to use in my battle against Hellweaver. In the meantime, do have yourself a very Merry Christmas. Santa's Little Helper by Charles Campbell. Holiday season in the Valley is something different, to say the least. It doesn't exactly drop to freezing in this part of South Carolina. There is what locals call cold spells from time to time, but nothing like the bone-chilling freeze that other parts of the country routinely experience. And today was Christmas Eve. Ronnie Baxley hated everything about it. Unfortunately, for the last 10 years, he and his rotund body were tapped to be Santa Claus for the Christmas tree lighting in downtown Burnettown. When he first started donning the red and white suit, the town would pay him $50 for about 5 or 6 hours of work. Now he makes almost $200 for begging little valley rats to sit on his lap. His once white beard was now something between baby shit yellow and turd brown. Ronnie had maybe 7 teeth left in his head. His breath smelled of dog shit chased down with sewer water. Ronnie sucked in his gut and eased into the driver's seat of his beat-up Chevy pickup. He gave the key a turn and the engine coughed and gagged like it had been smoking those Marlboros right along with Ronnie for the last 30-plus years. Ronnie turned the dial on the radio and was met with the sound of jingle bells. He immediately turned off the radio. The bald tires spun in the muddy driveway of his decrepit trailer as he backed out. Ronnie began to sing in the tune of the freshly in mind Jingle Bells. Driving through the mud, in my fucked up Chevrolet, off to the valley I go, broke as fuck today. The words trailed off into a da-da-da-da-da-da as his mind had run out of wit for freestyling. He didn't want to go to Burnettown. Ronnie was sick of listening to the little and some not-so-little valley rats drone on about wanting a PlayStation machine or an Xbox or some kind of modern gadget. The kids weren't normal anymore. Faces always stuck in some kind of screen. Few and far between were the requests for footballs, basketball hoops, Barbie dolls, or bicycles. As a matter of fact, Ronnie was just as tired of the parents, especially the ones he knew from school, with their pity-filled eyes. Look at what has become of Ronnie. Poor guy had a great arm in high school. He could have gone pro. Should have had a career in the majors, but the valley got him like it got so many kids. If he saw one more tear-filled eye from a mother looking as if she were doing the world a service by feeding a stray, he was going to lose his shit. The sun was already setting when he arrived at town hall. He cursed daylight savings time every year when the clock rolled back. It meant that 6 p.m. was going to look the same as midnight, and that always made Ronnie tired as shit. Tonight was the one night he couldn't be tired. He'd have to sit on the big wooden chair, hoping there was still enough material in the seat of his pants to keep the splinters out of his ass, while pretending to listen as Betty Sue or Molly May tells him what kind of iPhone she wants. Because, you know, the elves are fucking masters at cutting-edge technology. Ronnie stood by his truck for a moment or two, taking a long drag on his last Marlboro. He'd have to wait until he got paid before he could pick up another pack from the minute shop. He'd have to bum a couple from Eddie the elf to get him through the evening. Eddie was a tall, skinny man, definitely not built like an elf, and he was willing to take $75 to usher kids to the lap of this sad excuse of a Santa. Ronnie was wishing for one more drag when a tiny voice startled him. "Merry Christmas, Santa," said the little girl suddenly standing next to him. Hey, little girl, where's your mama?" Ronnie asked, forcing a smile. He had never seen this child before, and she didn't look like she had an ounce of valley in her. "I don't have one," the little girl said just above a whisper. Ronnie looked her over. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, and she was dressed like a tiny elf. She had long black hair and the darkest pools for eyes Ronnie had ever seen. He thought maybe the darkness was playing tricks on him, but the parking lot was well lit. He knelt to meet her gaze, keeping his plastic smile. "So, if you don't have a mama, is your daddy around?" "I don't have one of those either," she whispered. "Who's here with you?" Ronnie asked. "You are, Santa," the little girl said as a grin spread under her nose. Ronnie was taken aback at the rows of razor-sharp teeth that clicked in front of him. "What the fuck are you?" Ronnie asked. He hadn't taken any strong shit and resisted the urge to reach out and touch her. If she wasn't real, he'd just look like he was talking to himself. But if she was real, she might just bite his fucking fingers off. "I'm Santa's little helper," she whispered. "What's your name?" Ronnie asked. He knew he should be scared, but it was just the opposite. He couldn't explain it, but he was feeling giddy. "Sarah," she replied. "Well, Sarah, I already have a helper. His name is Eddie the elf," Ronnie said. He could now hear people mulling around Sassafras Park, site of the tree lighting and lap sitting. "Eddie's not going to make it tonight," the little girl said with a certainty that Ronnie instantly believed. "Oh, really? How do you know that?" Ronnie asked. "He's dead," she replied. "And how do you know that?" Ronnie found himself asking. "He wasn't going to help you, Santa. He was going to hurt you like all the rest," she replied. Ronnie smiled with an understanding that made the girl grin back. "Okay then. Let's go see the Valley Rats," Ronnie said.
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
The front doors of Town Hall were wide open. There was a small line of husbands receiving cups of hot cocoa for their wives and tots. Sarah stuck by Ronnie's side as he strode past the line of kids hooping and hollering for their tortured Santa. He waved a stained glove in the air for their approval as he sat on the big wooden chair. Elma Trudeau, an office administrator for the town of Burnettown, leaned in and whispered in his ear. "Where's Eddie?" she asked while staring a hole through Sarah. "He's sick," Ronnie replied, which elicited a closed-mouthed smile from Sarah. It was a smile that sent a feeling of despair through Elma. "Who's going to control the line?" Elma asked with a tone that clarified she was not willing to assume the role. "I'm Santa's little helper," Sarah replied. "Surely you can't suggest that a child... Oh, and by the way, whose child is this anyway?" "She's not from around here," Elma said. "She's my niece. Her name is Sarah, and she's visiting from Atlanta," Ronnie replied. "I call bullshit, Ronnie. You don't have any family," Elma said. "I would suggest you go back to your office, Elma," Sarah intervened, revealing her teeth. "What the fuck?" Elma whispered as she backed away. "You should listen to her and go back to your office," Ronnie echoed and stood. Elma's hands trembled and eyes widened as she slowly backed away. "Ho, ho, ho! Eddie the elf is not feeling well, so Santa has a new helper today," Ronnie announced to the expanding line of children. There were cheers and shouts from the boys and girls. Sarah moved quickly to the front of the line and lifted the retractable belt from the stanchion. Mary Jenkins and her little boy Sam were the first in line. Sarah giggled as she reached for Sam's hand. He took it without hesitation as Mary stepped through. Sarah looked back as if to tell the next kid she would have to wait her turn before taking Sam to Santa. Ronnie resisted the urge to roll his eyes at Mary Jenkins, who is now Mary Utley. She was a cheerleader in high school and he actually had clumsy sex with her once in the boys' locker room. It was definitely nothing memorable for her because, as he recalled, he was almost done before they got started. The kid sat on his lap and he could feel the look of pity from Mary boring into the side of his skull. "Poor Ronnie. I can't believe we actually fucked once. Look at him now. Poor Ronnie." Sam was blabbing to Ronnie about a video game, and Sarah tapped Mary on her arm with a sharp, pointy fingernail. "What is it?" Mary asked, taken out of her pitiful thoughts of Ronnie. "Santa doesn't like you, and neither do I," Sarah said. Mary's eyes widened in surprise as Sarah smiled at her with clicking teeth. "Sam, let's go," Mary shouted as she grabbed Sam by the arm as he was still in the midst of explaining why this particular PlayStation game was a must to have under the tree. Mary pulled him so violently Sam's arm almost came clean out of its socket. "Mom! Ow!" Sam screamed as she began dragging him away. "Let's go," Mary shouted. Sarah moved quickly, grabbing Mary by her not-so-dainty wrist. Mary's mouth drew back in disdain as the little girl's skin-to-skin touch was icy cold. "You're not nice. You deserve what's coming to you," Sarah said, and then released her grip. Mary dragged a screaming Sam behind her. While all this was going on, nobody in the line of kids sensed what kind of craziness was happening. Crazy shit was par for the course on Highway 421, even on Christmas Eve. Ronnie watched in joy and amazement. This shit was making him so happy. Sarah clicked her teeth at him as she went to get the next kid. Barbara Spradley was next with her kid Lisa. Ronnie wasn't a fan of the Spradley clan. They were pretty much Valley royalty, owning several businesses on this stretch of road. The 6-year-old scampered up to Santa, holding Sarah's cold hand. She had the distinct Spradley dimple in her chin, with eyes so big she almost looked like a character from a Dr. Seuss book. "Hey, Santa," Lisa said with a lisp. "Hey, little one. What do you want for Christmas this year?" "I want a Barbie dream house, and a couple of new Barbies, 'cause I cut the hair off the other ones, and, easy bake oven," Lisa finished. Ronnie was taken aback with Lisa. She was a little girl that actually wanted little girl gifts. It was nothing that needed the smart descriptor or required the timed mashing of buttons on a video game controller. Again, these requests were few and far between, but when they came, it made Ronnie feel somewhat normal. For a few seconds. Sarah noted the genuine smile on Ronnie's face and felt his approval, so she stayed quiet and gave Barbara a closed-mouthed smile, which Barbara politely returned. The next kid was big, and so was his father. It was Travis Cheatham and his son, Little Travis. Sarah reached for Little Travis's hand and he jerked away, giving her the finger in the process. Big Travis chuckled as if to say, "That's my boy." Sarah smiled. "Hey, fucknut," Big Travis shouted as Little Travis pulled himself up onto Ronnie's lap. Ronnie groaned at the weight of almost 200 pounds of this 11-year-old. Ronnie remembered Big Travis. They were once teammates, but never friends. Big Travis always had a jealous streak, and he loved seeing Ronnie like this. Big Travis ran a shady lawn care company in the valley, mostly cash transactions. He liked tossing his weight around figuratively and literally. His kid was 200 pounds, and Big Travis was over 3 bills, almost 4. "Hey, fucknut, my dad is talking to you," Little Travis repeated. "That's not very nice," Sarah intervened before Ronnie could speak. "Who asked you, you little bitch?" Little Travis replied while looking back at the approving smile of his pops. "Listen here, you will be getting coal in your stocking. You can't talk to my little—" "Shut the fuck up, Ronnie. You are a fucking loser. Nobody loves you. You stink like ass, and you're the sorriest sack of shit Santa I've ever seen." Little Travis didn't get the last word out. Sarah moved with cat-like quickness. She jerked Little Travis from Ronnie's knee and sank her teeth into the side of his neck, ripping out his trachea in one fell swoop. Blood spewed like a geyser from the dying kid's neck. Big Travis was still trying to register what he was seeing. The color had flushed from his face. Kids were now screaming. Sarah leapt from Little Travis and lunged at Big Travis, her claws digging into his soft, flabby flesh. She scaled up and around his back like a lizard on a brick wall. Ronnie was smiling. Ronnie was laughing. "Ho, ho, ho, fucknut!" Ronnie shouted as Sarah raked her claws across Big Travis's face, opening gouges in his fat cheeks. Big Travis grabbed Sarah by the hair with his huge hands and pulled with all his strength. Sarah didn't budge. She was now clicking her teeth in front of his frightened eyes. "You aren't a nice man. You can't treat Santa like that and live." Sarah pressed the sharp claws of her thumbs right into Big Travis's eyes. They went so deep she could feel the soft tissue beneath them. Big Travis fell face first as Sarah leapt from his chest. Her movements were fluid and fast. Now this shit had everyone's attention. Children were screaming, mothers were calling for fathers, and gunshots began to fill the air. This had gone well beyond regular 421 crazy shit. Ronnie was smiling as he watched Santa's little helper go to work. She was blindingly fast. She was eviscerating every man with a gun. Ronnie felt the pain in his chest. He was hit, but he was still grinning. The blue lights of the Burnett Town police were now everywhere. There would be no tree lighting this year, and Sarah was still moving through the crowd. She was in a blood frenzy of death and destruction. Ronnie felt the warmth of blood flowing from his wound. Shots were still ringing out, but there were less of them. Ronnie stood in front of the wooden chair watching the mayhem in front of him. Not 5 minutes ago, the kids were in line with their pity-filled mothers, waiting to beg him for shit he could never afford himself. The way these people treated Ronnie over the years was shameful. No words of encouragement from any of them. Just fucking pity. That's why Ronnie hated Christmas. But not this year. No, sir. The girl was his vengeance. She knew. She could sense the ones that had been cruel to Ronnie, and the ones that didn't offer help, only pity. Sarah could smell it on them as she literally cut through town. "Merry Christmas to all! And to all a good night!" Ronnie shouted as one more shot rang out. It found its mark, hitting him in the forehead. The last thing he saw was Sarah's face and her clicking teeth as everything went dark. Ronnie died right there, but he died with the solace that he'd experienced the best Christmas ever. It was finally his happy ending. Sarah was his elf of vengeance, and he loved her for it. The Day That Santa Died by Keith Tomlin. Excerpts from Santa's Bodyguard, My Journey from Vietnam to the North Pole, an autobiography by Jonathan L. Copeland, as featured in the December 2011 issue of the Weatherby Monthly True Crime Journal. Writer's note: I hate to start the story off with exposition, but I need to make sure that the realities of the situation are understood by the reader. These are explained in detail in the book version, but readers of this excerpt may benefit from knowing the following. 1. There are around 2,000 elves in existence. The vast majority of these elves are living a happy life, working for Santa. There are, however, a few that, in their terms, escaped from the North Pole. These elves, called renegades, vowed to release their fellow elves from their enslavement of their oppressor. For the record, I have not seen any indication that Santa was anything but kind and generous to those who worked for him. 2. Many supernatural phenomena surround Santa Claus and Christmas. Many of these are well documented in popular culture, such as flying reindeer and circumventing the entire Earth in one night while delivering presents. However, 2 lesser-known ones affect this story. The first is that explosives, including gunpowder and, by extension, firearms, do not work around Santa Claus. The same goes for internal combustion engines. Santa cannot ride in a car, plane, or helicopter. When I asked him about these and other unusual occurrences, he would simply shrug and say, "It's Christmas magic." I could get no further explanations. John Copeland, 2011. December 18th, 1989. Cooper's Department Store, Brickton, New Jersey. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel that something was wrong. This sixth sense saved my life many times in Vietnam, and I've learned to trust it. I triggered the radio. "Steve, how are things looking?" The reply came back. "Everything looks good here, boss." "Alan, everything good on your end?" "Yep, no issues, just kids everywhere," Alan replied. "Dave, how are you doing?" No reply. "Dave." Still no reply. "Jeff?" Again, no reply. "Damn," I sighed. I triggered the radio again. "Okay, Alan, I want you to stop letting people in. Tell them that Santa has to feed his reindeer or whatever. Steve, make your way towards Dave's sector, but be careful. Head on a swivel. I'll head to where Jeff was." After Alan and Steve confirmed, I head off down an aisle stacked with boxes of board games. A look to my right confirmed that Santa was still in the Winter Wonderland village that Cooper's department store set up for him. Kids were lined up across the sales room floor and down the unpowered escalator. I heard tiny footsteps running behind me. I turned and walked back towards sporting goods. A blur of motion turned down an aisle in the baseball section. I quickly covered the ground between me and the mouth of the aisle. Peering around the corner, I saw a child no older than 6 standing there, giggling, his mouth covered in chocolate. I cautiously made my way towards him. "Hi there. Are you lost? Where are your parents?" I asked. "They over there," he said, pointing somewhat in the direction of Santa's village. I approached closer, every nerve screaming. "What are you doing here? Don't you want to meet Santa?" "The little man gave me candy and said that you wanted to play hide and seek," the child said, grinning. I began to answer when my instincts told me to duck. A long blade whipped across the aisle, barely missing my head. Out of habit and training, my hand reached for a pistol at my waist. I then remembered I was not carrying a firearm and instead grabbed a wooden baseball bat just in time to block another strike from the short sword. The sword dug into the wood deep enough to catch, and I was able to twist the bat to the side and rip that sword out of the grip of a short creature standing on the top shelf. I dropped the bat and grabbed its legs, turned and swung it across the aisle, hitting its head on a metal bin full of baseball bats. I let go and it landed on the floor, its neck twisted at an impossible angle. I heard the kid behind me running away, yelling for his mother. I got my first look at the creature and cursed. It was around 3 feet tall, with a thin, narrow face, long gray beard, and pointy ears. "Guys," I said into the radio, "we got elves. Time to shut it down. Alan, they don't usually attack civilians, but make sure everybody makes it safely off the property. Steve, make your way to me. I'll be with the big guy." Immediately, the guys acknowledged. I changed channels and radioed to have the reindeer sleigh sent for a roof extraction. As I began to quickly walk toward the Winter Wonderland setup, I tripped a fire alarm mounted on a wall. Sirens and flashing lights filled the store as a pre-recorded voice played over the sound system, asking all guests to leave the building in an orderly fashion via the nearest exit. In the Winter Wonderland set, store employees began helping crying children and worried parents exit the roped-off queue. Santa, looking majestic in his classic red robes with white trim, was reassuring everyone and asking them to be careful on the way out. I walked up to Santa, my eyes trying to scan everyone and everything at once, my nerves screaming. Santa noticed my approach and turned to me, concern etched into his ageless face. "John, my boy, what is going on? Is everyone okay?" he asked, his deep voice rising above the surrounding chaos. I shook my head. "No, sir. The renegades are here. I have a few people missing, but I haven't heard any issues with the civilians." "Oh my," he said, pausing. "How did they find me?" "Unclear at this point," I replied. "Around Christmas, there are thousands of actors posing as Santa around the world, meeting children, leading parades, and doing other Christmassy duties. For years, I tried in vain to get the real Santa to cancel his personal appearances, but he refused, saying that the only way to know what children really want is to get out there and talk to them. I was able to stop him from announcing his appearances, hoping that the sheer number of other Santas would act as decoys and serve as a form of Christmas camouflage. "We can worry about that later, sir. Now we need to get you to the roof for pickup," I told him. "I'll go once I know the children are safe," he replied. "Sir, we need to get you out of here." "When the children are safe," Santa said with a bit of an edge in his voice. Roger that. I knew that once he made up his mind, there was no changing it. I turned to face the dwindling crowd, scanning for dangers. I spoke into the radio. "Alan, what's the situation?" Alan answered, a bit breathless. "The crowd streaming out of the building is thinning out a bit. I saw some short figures, non-children, entering through the loading dock. Steve went after them." "Stay with the crowd. Make sure nothing happens to them," I said. "Steve, head up to me." No answer. "Steve." Still nothing. Damn, I thought, as I put the radio into a holster on my belt. After a few tense minutes, some of the longest of my life, Alan's voice came over the radio. "Boss, employees are saying the store should be empty." "Roger that. Heading to the roof," I replied. That's when the lights went out. The world went black except for the flashing lights of the fire alarm. Moments later, the emergency lights came on, their dim, pale lights combined with the firelights casting an eerie shadow. "Sir," I said, "we need to go now." A somber-looking Santa nodded. "Yes, John, I believe you're right." Weaving through the aisles and holiday displays, I led Santa toward the back stairway. As we entered housewares, 3 diminutive figures emerged out of the darkness at the end of the aisle, the amber alarm lights shining off of the short steel swords they were wielding. I pulled Santa behind me and turned to face the attackers. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw a dark shape launch itself from the top shelf toward Santa. I sidestepped to intercept, putting my body between Santa and the threat. I raised my left arm to block the assault, and a long, thin blade pierced my forearm. The weight of the small body forced my arm back, and the tip of the knife cut a long, cruel gash in my cheek. I grabbed the attacker, an older gray-haired elf, with my right hand and awkwardly chucked the flailing body at the other 3, who were now running down the aisle, swords raised.
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
One of the attackers tripped over the thrown elf while the other 2 slowed down, now that I had turned my attention to them. As they cautiously walked forward, I pulled the knife from my forearm, causing a fresh wave of blood to flow. I held the knife at the ready. As a Green Beret in Vietnam, my unit was often at a numeric disadvantage when we encountered the enemy. In those situations, I found that it was best to cause confusion in the enemy by doing the unexpected, which usually came down to a quick and bloody display of extreme violence. I whispered to Santa, "Keep an eye out behind you. I'll be right back." I didn't wait for an answer. Instead, I roared at the top of my lungs and began to run towards the elves as fast as I could. This startled them, and they raised their swords in a defensive posture. As I got within a few feet of the elf on the right side, I went into a feet-first baseball slide, the polished and waxed floor assisting me with a surprising lack of resistance. I hit him just under his right knee. The crack of the bones was louder than the fire alarm. As he fell, he tried to strike me, but only took out a small slice of my left arm. Most of the damage was absorbed by my suit jacket. At this time, I realized that I had slid too close to the bottom of the shelf, and it was restricting my movements. My initial hope was to take out the right elf with the baseball slide, then spin to face away from the upright attacker and use my feet to keep him at bay until I can find an opportunity to stand up. Not the best plan I've ever come up with, but better than none. The middle attacker approached and batted away my ineffectual attempts to fend him off with my injured arm. He raised his sword and plunged it down at me. At the last moment, I was able to turn and took the strike on my left side. Using what little strength I had in my left arm, I tried to push him away as he grabbed the sword with both hands and leaned into it. That's when I stopped pushing and pulled him toward me, his sword passing through me and striking the floor. Shock showed on his face as he fell forward, unable to compensate for the lack of resistance. I stared into his face inches from mine as I brought my right hand up and plunged the dagger into his side over and over again. I felt the front of my shirt grow wet with his blood, and the light in his eye slowly dimmed. I let go and he slumped over, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Using the shelves to pull myself up, I grasped the hilt of the small sword and pulled it free, wincing from the pain. Rolling my left shoulder, I deduced that the wound on my side was less serious than I originally thought. No vital organs were hit. I look at the 3 living elves lying on the ground. The one with the broken leg was still clutching it and rolling around, moaning. The one I threw was still lying, dazed on the tile floor, while the one that tripped over him was just rising to his feet, his cold eyes boring into me. I took a step and kicked him hard in the face. A wet crunch could be heard as a shelf split the back of his skull open and wedged into his brain. I then struck the elf he tripped over with the sword until he stopped moving. I verified that the elf with the broken leg wasn't a threat before looking over at Santa. Santa Claus stood there, speechless, his ashen white face registering both shock and disgust. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "Sir, we should be going," I said, looking around for additional threats. Santa shook his head like he was coming out of a trance. He looked at the carnage in front of him and asked, "Was that necessary?" "Sir, let's go," I replied. Santa took one last look at the bodies before him and slowly nodded. We made our way past the jewelry counter and into women's wear. I grabbed a couple of scarves from a bin and bound my wounds as best I could. Santa gave me a disapproving look, but softened when I told him that I would pay for them later. I almost added "if we live," but chose to keep that part to myself. We heard movement behind us. At least 4 sets of footsteps heading our way. I began pushing Santa to move faster, hoping to reach the stairway to the roof before the renegades caught us. My 6th sense was screaming that there was something I was missing, but years of inaction had blunted the tactical sense that had been honed into a razor's edge in foreign wars. Finally, I saw the gap in the shelves along the back wall with a bright red sign that read "Emergency Exit." As we neared it, something flew by and smacked into the wall ahead of us. I looked back, and a small figure was frantically trying to reload a crossbow. I pushed Santa faster, almost knocking him off his feet, and we slammed into a metal exit door. A shrill alarm began going off, further adding to the chaos of the situation. I slammed the door shut and looked around. Stairs were going up on the left and down on the right. Also on the right was a mop and bucket. I grabbed the mop and wedged it between the bottom step and the door. It wouldn't last long, but it should slow them down. Santa was trying to catch his breath and, as much as I hated to do it, I couldn't give him time to rest. "Sir, the roof is 1 flight up. We're almost there," I said as reassuringly as I could. He nodded and began climbing. I did my best to keep watch both ahead and behind us. When we made the turn to the final set of stairs, I began hearing yells and pounding from below. I readied the sword that I still carried and prompted Santa to climb even faster. When we finally made it to the roof access door, we paused. I pushed Santa against the wall and stood in front of him, sword at the ready. I radioed the reindeer team. "What's the status of the sleigh?" I asked. "We're landing now. The roof is clear. We're a go," was the reply. I sighed. Finally, something was going our way. "Ready, sir?" I asked Santa. He chuckled. "I can almost taste the hot chocolate now." As I nodded to him, I heard a crash from below us and yells of triumph. Santa opened the roof door, and I followed close behind him, facing the stairway. As soon as I backed onto the roof, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't until later that I realized that it was the lack of noise. 9 reindeer make a ton of noise, even when they're just standing still, and the roof was eerily quiet. As I heard Santa say, "Oh my," I turned and noticed an odd contraption set off to the left. It had a 4-inch tube and 2 large tanks behind it. 3 elves were standing around it, 2 holding long daggers while the 3rd carried a short spear. One elf yelled, "Now!" And the one with the spear brought it down on a lever, and the machine roared. I suddenly realized that this was a huge air cannon. A metal ball shot out, flying towards Santa's chest. I tried to leap in front of him to intercept the threat, but it seemed like I was moving in slow motion. I was able to get my left arm up in front of the cannonball. It ricocheted off of my arm, shattering bone, and struck Santa in the stomach. I fell to the ground and must have blacked out for a few seconds. When I came to, I saw that Santa was lying on the roof about 6 feet away, flanked by the 3 elves from the cannon. Another 3 elves were approaching from the other side of the roof, and 4 more had emerged from the stairway. Still dazed, I watched the elves surround Santa, who lay there, gasping for breath. The elf with the spear stepped forward and jammed it into Santa's chest. That broke the dam, and the others rushed ahead, plunging their knives into the large man over and over again. Blood began to pool on the roof, and the elves' handmade boots made red footprints as they splashed through the puddle, eagerly elbowing their way through the frenzied mob to take another stab. I gave up trying to stand and slumped back to the ground, all of my will to fight drained out of me. I screamed, but the only thing I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the soft, wet thud of the knives hitting their mark. I hung my head and wept, but soon the sounds of the slaughter stopped. I thought that I would look up to find myself surrounded by bloodthirsty heathens. However, when I opened my eyes, I saw that the elves had backed up, staring at the body on the ground.
Did you hear that? Better check the locks on your doors. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Lights began pulsing from each of the dozens of Santa's wounds. The light became brighter, and the elves stumbled back further, one falling down, but none of them took their eyes off of the corpse in front of them. Santa's body began to shake and rose in the air like some rag doll held up by an invisible hand. The light became blinding, and I had to turn away from the blazing nova that the fat man had become. There was a loud crackle and then a deafening thump, followed by a light so bright that it rivaled the sun. After a few minutes, I opened my eyes and tried to blink away the spots that danced in front of them. Santa's body still hung in the air, but the light was beginning to dim as his wounds slowly closed. I was struck by the thought that he looked like a white, bearded Jesus crucified on an invisible cross. I felt like I was going mad and began to laugh. That stopped when I noticed the charred and smoking bodies of the renegade elves scattered around the roof. Hearing a scraping sound, I turned to see that one of the elves survived. Most of its body was charred, and it was using its one good arm to pull itself along. I stumbled to my feet, the pain in my arm and side beginning to throb as the adrenaline wore off. I shuffled over to the remaining elf and flipped it over onto its back. The majority of its face was burnt black, except for the area around its right eye. I could feel the hate radiating from it as it looked past me, focused on something behind me. "Oh, Clarence," Santa said, walking up to look down at the elf. "My poor boy, I wish I could help you." "Help?" Clarence croaked between charred lips. "Let us go." Santa shook his head. "If I could, I would, but it's out of my control." "Liar! Set us free," Clarence said, his anger giving strength to his voice. Santa got down on one knee and grabbed Clarence's good hand. "You don't think I've tried to leave? It affects me, just like it affects you. After 2 days away from the North Pole, I start feeling the tug of the place, trying to pull me back. After a week away, I can't sleep. I can barely eat. And that's just the start of the struggle. All I can think of is my workshop and my overwhelming need to get back to it. I finally just accepted my fate and embraced my role in life. We bring joy to the children of the world, and that's a worthy way to spend one's life." Doubt showed in Clarence's face, and he whispered a final word. "Who?" Santa patted his hand. It's the spirit of Christmas that calls to us, that pulls us back. Its magic is fueled by the hopes and dreams of children all over the world. As long as there are children who believe in Christmas, the Christmas spirit will be there to guide us. Santa stopped talking as a groan escaped from Clarence's mouth, and the light in his eyes went out. Santa bowed his head and wept. After a few minutes, he gently placed the elf's hand on the ground and stood, wiping his face. I radioed the sleigh team and, after verifying their identification, found that they never received the original request for a rooftop pickup. After scheduling the pickup, I turned to Santa and noticed that he was poking a finger through one of the dozens of cuts in his jacket. "John?" he said, confused. "What happened?" "Well, sir, you died," I replied. "Did I know?" "So how did I undie?" he asked. "Unclear. You started floating in the air and burst into a bright light, and now you're alive." "Really? Strange." Santa shrugged. "Christmas magic," he said. "Yes, sir. Christmas magic." Epilogue. In the dark space between two air units, Frederick the elf lowered the crossbow and placed it next to the backpack of the electronic equipment he used to intercept the radio transmissions. He tore his gaze off Santa and closed his eyes to quell his rage. With that rage subsiding, the pull of the north returned. He spent a few minutes conquering that urge, his shaking hands finally growing still. Calm descended and he began to review what he learned. Santa can't be killed, at least not in traditional ways. Santa is not the source of the pull, but he is a willing participant in the oppression of the elves. The spirit of Christmas is the force that tries to pull them back to the North Pole. Human children all over the world give power to the spirit of Christmas. To lessen the pull of the spirit of Christmas, we need to decrease what gives it power, namely, human children. Frederick opened his eyes. He knew what he had to do. Now is the time for planning. He cocked his head and seemed to hear sleigh bells off in the distance. He took one last look at Santa and his bodyguard before slinking off into the darkness. Thank you for reading the Weatherby Monthly True Crime Journal. Please check out next month's issue, where we will have the next installment of excerpts from John Copeland's autobiography. In that article titled Infanticide, Generation Blood, he explores one of the bloodiest terror campaigns in human history. Scary Christmas to All by David O'Hanlon. Santa paced the ancient floorboards of his study. The world had changed. Toys were bought in stores and fewer children believed in the magic of Santa. There were many tasked with keeping the balance of good and evil, but technology was quickly pushing them all into the realm of mythology. The Fat Man had gone to extremes to keep his operation relevant long past its expiration date, but it wouldn't matter much longer. Santa chewed the end of his cigar and stopped pacing in front of the wooden chest. The lock laid broken next to the splinters of wood where the thieves had carelessly chopped open the ancient, ornate chest. The contents had been replaced with a manifesto scrawled in Tomitian script. In one night, they would undo centuries of legend and tip the scales forever, unless they could be stopped. Santa struck a match and held it to the tip of the cigar, knowing there was only one solution, only one operative elf enough for the task. "I'm freezing my fucking ornaments off," Peppermint Ray declared as he stepped into the study and kicked the door shut behind him. "This is one hell of a storm." "Nothing compared to what is coming," Santa said somberly. I called you in for a very important assignment, Ray. I finally get to kill Jeff Bezos? Ray perked up. No. It worked with Toys R Us, Ray argued. If we take out Amazon and Walmart, they'll have to come to us for toys. We'll be back in business, full tilt boogie. Maybe next year, Ray. Santa stepped away from the pilfered chest. If there is one. Fuck me with a nutcracker, Ray gasped. The elf went to the box. His face twitched with conflicting emotions as he knelt to retrieve the manifesto from the spot that should have held one of the North Pole's 3 sacred documents. He skimmed the pages of lunatic ramblings. He's going to give out toys to the entire naughty list, Ray said. Who would do this? He calls himself Candy Pane. Sugar Plum Gary flicked a frozen booger from his finger. His bulbous nose almost glowed from the bite of the winter storm, blowing across the Great Lakes. Elves didn't chill easily, but the storm made him pull the parka tighter around him. Gary liked to eat paint, specifically orange, and had lost his job making toys long before the bubble burst for everyone else. He'd been cleaning the stables for the past 2 centuries, which he didn't mind. The reindeer never made fun of him, at least. They would have if they could talk, but they couldn't, so Gary was content with his new occupation. He stabbed his finger back into his nostril to mine another frozen snot nugget. As dumb as Gary was, even he knew the storm was their fault. It had started moments after they pilfered the naughty list and intensified with every toy they delivered along their path. Candy Andy knew it too. Gary watched the elven David Koresh saw through the security guard's neck with a serrated silver blade. Gary always wanted to be one of the Black Mittens, Santa's elite corps of assassins that purged the evilest names from the naughty list with absolute ruthlessness. Gary had never even gotten to issue a coal citation to a bad kid, let alone gotten to bump one off. Andy told him he was lucky for that. War changes an elf. And the naughty list had become the North Pole's version of Vietnam. The Black Mittens were so backlogged that they'd started working during Christmas and July just to keep from drowning in the swelling sea of evil caused by the influx of department store toys. Andy wiped the blade clean and sheathed it. His short, powerful arms cast the line of his grappling hook all the way to the top of the watchtower. Gary stared in awe as the elf scurried up the structure despite the brutal onslaught of wind. Gary darted from the bushes and waited inside the guard shack for his signal. Andy hadn't told him what the signal would be, just that he'd know it when he saw it. A moment later, the sniper's corpse crashed to the icy pavement. His intestines stretched up from his torn abdomen all the way back to the top of the tower. Gary giggled and stepped out of the shack, looking up at the meaty garland glistening with already frozen blood. He plucked it, fascinated by the wet twang it made, and waited another moment for Andy's signal. Nothing happened. Gary looked down at the body and gasped. "Oh, you're the signal!" He darted back inside and pulled the lever. Ice cracked from the hinges as the gates forced themselves open despite the accumulating snow. The vibration rattled loose icicles from the bronze lettering overhead. The elf looked up and sounded out the letters. It was easy enough, even for him. "Kill you." Gary squinted through the snowflakes to make sure he read it correctly. There it was, in big, blocky font. "Kill you." Andy rappelled down the tower and gracefully hit the ground. He waved for Gary to come through. The ditzy elf waddled between the still opening gates and pointed at the letters. "Say, Andy, what? Ah!" Andy had him by the throat before he could say another word. "I won't tell you again," he snarled. "It's Pain. Candy Pain." The name wasn't the only thing he'd changed about himself. His uniform had been replaced with leather and spikes, and around his neck he wore a heavy chain of sterling candy canes for every elf that died under his command. Each ornament was spaced out with the withering, rotten ear of a naughty child. "Sorry, Candy Pane," Gary gulped. "I was just wondering about the sign is all. It's a strange name for an orphanage." "Orphanage?" Candy Pane laughed. "Krieger, Illinois, Youth Offender Unit, better known as Kill You Island." Candy Pane swept an arm at the structure. The former mental asylum was little more than a shadow through the snowfall. The tiny island had always been a place of evil and violence. It attracted it, the way rot attracts flies. Krieger sat far enough on Lake Michigan to make it the perfect place to lock away the most dangerous juvenile delinquents in the state. Many of the residents had received their lump of coal, while others had skipped straight to the top of the naughty list. Somewhere in the pint-sized penal colony was the mission objective: the Kinder Cannibal, little Robbie Mocker. "Christmas dies tonight," Candy Pane snarled. Santa's glare was hard and cold as gunmetal. Mrs. Claus sat the tray of sugar cookies next to the scales. On one side, a glittery glass ornament, and on the other, a lump of coal mined by Krampus himself. The two pans had never been level, but they never teetered too far in one direction either. Now, the coal moved lower by the minute. "No point in watching it, dear," the missus said, offering up one of the cookies. Santa took the snowman-shaped cookie and chomped the head off. "If he fails," Santa started. "Then do something about it." She slid into his lap. "The sleigh is packed and ready. Hand out as many toys as possible. Buy Ray the time he needs to destroy Candy Pane." "Ray's no match for him," Santa admitted. "I should have sent everyone." "Then we'd be burying a lot of dead elves for New Year's," Mrs. Claus said. "Ray will win this fight because he's just as much a symbol of Christmas as you are." Santa raised a woolly brow. "I don't think we're talking about the same elf." "How many wars have you delivered presents through? How many communities have come together in times of disaster, fed one another during famines, sang carols through plagues? Christmas is not a holiday. It's not presents. It's not even Santa Claus. It's an unyielding spirit," she said, coiling the curls of his beard around her fingers. "The true meaning of Christmas is love. That's why it always endures, no matter what turmoil comes. Peppermint Ray is the embodiment of the Christmas spirit." "He's a sadistic munchkin that enjoys killing," Santa huffed. "You enjoy your work, too." She kissed his forehead. "Which is why you need to get off your fat ass and get to it. Keep the scales moving in our favor, dear. Ray will do his job, and tomorrow we'll drink our eggnog from Candy Andy's skull." Fruitcake flew around the island a second time. Bonfires burned high despite the battery of sub-zero winds. Inmates danced and fired captured guns into the air in celebration. An explosion illuminated scores of dead guards, making bloody snow angels in the yard. Ray could smell burnt flesh wafting up on the smoke. He checked the magical compass, and the needle pointed straight down. "Looks like the little shits opened their Christmas presents early," he groaned. "You ready for Christmas dinner, pal?" The reindeer rumbled excitedly. "Good. It's colder than Prancer's pecker up here, and I want all the feeling in my fingers when I close them around Andy's throat." Fruitcake snorted. "Shit, you're right. We need tunes." Ray turned on the Bluetooth speaker hanging from Fruitcake's saddle. He nodded his head as the bells tinkled and the music began. The reindeer let out a long, hoarse call of agreement. "That's right, Candy Andy. All I want for Christmas is you. To die." The reindeer changed course, speeding toward the island. Ray drew his scimitar and shifted to the side to hack down one of the escaped convicts. Bullets whizzed by his head. His steed banked hard, nearly flinging Ray from the saddle. A pair of teens cut loose with their festively painted assault rifles. Fruitcake twisted, flying over them upside down, and then biting one's head, while Ray impaled the other. The skull crunched loudly between the reindeer's teeth. In the chaos, Ray almost missed the incoming call. He turned down the music and answered the phone while Fruitcake flew into a group of delinquents. "Peppermint Party Line," he said gleefully. "Ray, Wait, is that gunfire?" Mrs. Claus asked. "Not everyone plays with the same kinds of toys." A bullet tore Ray's hat off. "Can I call you back?" "No, you cannot," Mrs. Claus said sternly. "This is going to be really hard for you, but you can't kill any of the kids on that island." Ray tugged the reins to pull Fruitcake up and away from the field of battle. 2 murder munchkins hung from his bloody antlers. Ray cleared his throat. The service is really bad with this storm and all," Ray said. I didn't hear you. You said kill all the naughty kids, right?" "None of them, Ray." "Oh, so yeah, we can do that," Ray mimed, shooting himself in the head. "Why exactly are we not killing them?" "The scales have tipped too far." Her voice sounded sullen and distant. It wasn't the storm making Ray's knees shake. If she was worried, then it really was the end of Christmas. Fruitcake tilted his head to slide one of the bodies closer so he could take a bite. Ray rolled his eyes. What was done, so his faithful steed might as well enjoy the spoils. "Okay, no more killing," Ray reluctantly agreed. "What's the plan?" "Give them gifts," she told him. "Restore the image of Santa. Remind them that Christmas is about love, and love is second chances, Ray." "How am I supposed to get past them without killing them?" "Make them toys, Ray." "I didn't exactly pack for that sort of thing. I have no toys." "Improvise. You were a toy maker long before you were a killer," she reminded him. "A terrible one." "The worst," she agreed. "Naughty kids now get crappy toys, and, thanks to you, we have a warehouse full of those." "Glad I could help," Ray said, deadpanned. "The other elves are mobilizing." "What about Candy Pane?" "Silly, Ray." Her voice perked up. "Everyone knows peppermint kills pain." Ray ended the call with a pointed smile. He tugged the reins and directed Fruitcake toward the roof of the prison. A mob of children surrounded him with pilfered nightsticks, shanks, and torches. Ray hopped down from his saddle. A bigger kid stepped out of the group to meet him wielding an axe adorned with mistletoe. "We didn't invite you to the Christmas party," the boy said in a pubescent squeak. "Why don't you and Rudolph fuck off?"
Are you afraid? Good. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Fruitcake shook his head, violently flinging the corpses from his antlers. He snorted and scraped his hoof through the snow. Blood soaked his snout and bubbled in his nostrils. "To be fair, you do have a red nose right now." Ray patted the animal's side. "Look, Dallas, we're here on important North Pole business." "How'd you know my name?" the boy demanded. "I read the naughty list like it's the Sunday paper," Ray said. "Before you chopped up your family, you made the list for smashing your sister's gerbil." The crowd gasped. "And I know you, and you, and you," Ray said as he turned and pointed at various children. He wagged his finger at one of them. "Especially you. That was some innovative work you did, kiddo." What do you want?" Dallas asked. "To give you presents." Ray threw his hands into the air. "Christmas is about second chances. The fat man's had a change of heart. Go on back to your cells before you catch a cold. Tomorrow, everyone gets gifts." "I already got my present." Dallas hefted the axe. "I said I wouldn't kill anyone else tonight, so try to run really fast so that I don't look like a liar." Ray pulled the bedazzled grenade from his pocket. 5-second fuse, 8-meter kill zone. It's doable, but just barely. The elf jerked the pin free, and the children scattered. Ray ran for the edge, knowing his stumpy legs would never get him clear in time. He jumped over the side, casting his grappling hook for the drain pipe, as the device exploded behind him. He planned on crashing through the window like John McClane, only Nakatomi Plaza didn't have bars over the windows. Ray struck the iron grid and bounced off, twisting on the rope like the world's ugliest ornament. He hit it again, but caught hold. Ray pulled his dagger and used it to unscrew the grate. He kicked out the glass and shimmied inside. "Fuck me with a nutcracker," he groaned. "Whatever gets your rocks off," the woman said before grabbing Ray by the throat and slinging him into a graffitied wall. Ray's tiny form shattered the sheetrock. A female guard towered over him. Her cut-off trousers revealed thick, muscular thighs, each one as big around as Ray himself. Scalps dangled from her pistol belt that hung below a hardened 8-pack of abdominal muscles. Ray's eyes widened when he saw she was topless and pinned her badge through her left nipple. She patted a nightstick against her palm. Growls and barks came from one of the cells. 2 of the guards came out wearing nothing but dog ears and tails. "This is the Pro Bowl of fucking psychopaths," he said, struggling to his feet. "I'm Commander Thatcher," the woman's voice boomed. Long before Mindy the Thrasher Thatcher had taken over Krieger Island, she'd been a women's wrestling champion and longtime resident of the naughty list. It was no wonder Candy Pane had picked Kill You Island to deliver his coup de grace to Christmas. "Sick him, boys." The 2 guards snarled and scurried at Ray on all fours. The elf juked around one, letting them crash together with a yip. He ran down the hall, hurtling gnawed bodies, and slid to a stop as another guard dog crawled out to block his path. Only this time, it was an actual dog. The terrier, wearing a mask of leather straps, dragged a length of intestines behind him. "You're breaking the law, convict!" Thatcher shouted. "My law. Now get your scrawny ass back in your cell." "Convict?" Ray tugged at his pointy ears. "You dumbass! I'm an elf!" The terrier growled. "Gimp doesn't give a shit what gang you're in. Neither do I." Thatcher tapped the baton with each step closer. "Bad children spend the night with the dogs." The human pups stalked alongside their mistress. They gnashed their bloody teeth, slinging pink saliva with each bark. This cell block belonged to Lucifer Lloyd. Thatcher tugged at a scalp on her belt. So did this. He thought he was the devil. "Think you'll scream as much as the devil when I peel your skull, elf?" "Keep talking and I'll do it myself." Ray cupped a hand to his ear. "Hear that? Is it time to make the cookies?" "That is just a hurtful stereotype," Ray barked. "You haven't seen how hurtful I can be yet," Thatcher laughed. "I was going to give you a witty one-liner," Ray said. "Better make it a zinger, because it'll be your last words." Thatcher drew the Bowie knife from her belt. Ray backed away from her. She clanked the weapons together rhythmically. The human animals howled for elf meat. Ray continued backpedaling until he felt the wet nose of the terrier touch his hand. The dog let out a deep, throaty growl and licked his fingers. "Don't you know?" Ray said with a giggle. "Elves are one with nature, even psycho mutts like this one." Gimp nuzzled its head under his arm, and Ray gave him pets. Thatcher stopped in her tracks. "I bet I know what a good puppy like you wants for Christmas," Ray chirped happily. "Chew toys!" The terrier bolted down the corridor, launching itself at the wannabes. The second pounced on him, biting into the dog's shoulder. Gimp didn't even make a yip before swinging around and tearing out the man's throat. Thatcher stumbled backwards, slipping in the arterial spray. The dog and the remaining guard locked up. Gimp latched onto the man's crotch, drawing a high-pitched wail. "Good boy! You found his squeaker!" Ray slouched. "Shit! I feel like Michael Vick watching this." Thatcher scrambled down the hallway with the dog on her heels. Ray whistled as he skipped away from the carnage to find the stairwell. He crept down stealthily, stopping to listen at the door. He could hear a ruckus beyond and decided to try another floor. Ray could rewrite the naughty list from memory. He knew who else housed on Kill You Island. Some of them wouldn't make it easy to keep his word to Mrs. Claus. On the third floor, Ray paused to listen. His ears twitched at the melodic giggling. Normal people do not giggle in the middle of a prison riot. He didn't need heightened senses to hear the screams that came next. The naughtiest inmate on the island was locked up in the basement. Ray knew that's where Payne would be going, if he wasn't there already. Unfortunately, that meant crossing the east wing of the facility. He knelt suddenly, putting his palm to the floor. Toy makers had to have an amazing sense of touch. It helped with stalking naughty children as well. Someone was coming up the stairs. His wide nostrils flared, taking in the scent. Chemicals clung to his nose hairs. He had a pretty good idea who it was, and exactly what the kid had asked for this Christmas. Ray was out of options. He slid through the door, closing it gently behind him. The 5 girls didn't notice him as they played Ring Around the Rosie with one of their dismembered but not dead cellmates. The arms and legs still twitched and danced next to the wriggling torso. Ray slumped. Bridget and Patty Booth led the sing-song chant. All together in a circle we sing the name of the most wicked thing, Mr. Jolly, the smiling king. Accept the sacrifice that we bring, Mr. Jolly, the smiling king, master of all that bite and sting. For you we kill and dance and sing. Enough! Ray whistled and clapped his hands. The girls quit dancing and the circle broke into a human chain that blocked the hall. They stared at the elf quizzically. This looks like a really fun slumber party, Ray pointed at the sacrifice. Well, maybe not for her, but you need to get to bed now. Santa is bringing everyone presents, but only if you're sound asleep when he gets here. Fuck Santa, Pat squeaked. We don't need that judgmental bastard. Yeah, like I've got 2 of those at home, Bridget added. They're called parents. We have the Smiling King, the other girls said in unison. Oh, yeah, that was creepy. Ray patted the air. Hate to tell you, but your creepypasta is a little undercooked. There is no Mr. Jolly is coming, the dismembered girl said with a mouthful of blood. It worked. Hail the Smiling King. The lights flickered in the hallway. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Ray drew his scimitar. It's a stupid internet story. What's Santa? Bridget asked. If you believe in something, really believe, it's real. Santa is real. Elves are real. Mr. Jolly is real. This is what we really want for Christmas, Pat said. Mr. Jolly, the Smiling King. A deep voice sang inside a cell. The name of the most wicked thing. The lights went out completely. The inhuman voice laughed. Ray's eyes adjusted quickly and he saw the girls jumping about giddily. Spindly fingers gripped the bars of the cell. Spiders scurried from his sleeves and over the claw-like digits. Ray heard muffled buzzing. The entity, still hiding in the abyss, retched, and the swarm of wasps billowed out into the corridor. Ray bolted for the door. He cranked on the handle. It wouldn't budge. A widow twisted gracefully on a strand of silk until it rested on his nose. Ray flicked it away and followed the string up to a shiny cufflink. A lithe, deathly hand held the door at the top. Ray turned slowly and looked up at the demonic thing the children had summoned. It glared down at him with bulging eyes, ringed with ragged flesh where lids had been cut away. Its gaunt face hung open and an oversized smile held together with rawhide stitching. "The king is holding court," it hissed without moving its mouth. "Sorry, Pally, but I like my creepypastas with extra red sauce." Ray swung the Tamatian sword across the creature's torso, slicing a wide gash that erupted with insects. They spilled over Peppermint Ray, biting and stinging his flesh. He dived between the monster's legs and rolled across the floor to squish as many as he could. The lights flicked back on. Mr. Jolly was gone. Ray looked around. The child cultists were slumped on the floor, covered in masses of swollen welts, and all wearing impossibly wide smiles. Ray touched a raised knot on his cheek and gingerly plucked the stinger from the center. "I don't care if I did just see you. I don't believe in you," he shouted. "So there! You can't hurt me!" The lights flickered and Ray screamed. The door opened at the opposite end of the hall. Mr. Jolly's laughter echoed from the other side. "Fucking crazy dominatrix, bitch. People acting like dogs and lunatics everywhere. Now a supernatural monster. This is worse than Christmas with Krampus." Ray threw his hands into the air. "What's next?" The door banged open behind him. "Chestnuts roasting on an open fire," the little boy sang. Ray dropped to the ground as the jet of napalm blazed over him. He turned over and watched Milo the Pyro blast the nearest cell with his flamethrower. "Doesn't anyone in this fucking place just want a Teddy Ruxpin?" Ray kipped up to his feet. "Listen, Milo. You're a pretty good kid. I mean, who hasn't burned down a house or 7, right? Do you know who I am?" "Yeah, you make those awesome cookies with fudge," Milo smiled. "I like those." "No, I do not." Ray saw the boy's eyes fill with hate. "Do not just make the fudge ones. I make them all. I'm the head cookie chef." "That sounds made up," Milo said. "Look at these shoes, Milo." Ray wiggled his foot. "Look at these pointy fucking ears. Do I look like a garden gnome? No, I look like an elf. Elves don't lie about serious shit, and there is no shit more serious than cookies to an elf." "Cool." Milo jabbed the flamethrower towards him. "I'm going to burn this place down now." "Can't deliver cookies to a pile of ash," Ray shrugged. "Health code and all that. I just signed a deal with Santa. The naughty nice thing is over. Naughty kids are getting presents now, and he knows how much you love my cookies." "Then why be nice?" Milo torched another cell. "Because there's better presents for the nice kids." Ray waved his hand. "They're still working out the details, but point is, you get cookies on Christmas morning. If you stop setting fires." "The striped ones too?" he asked. Ray looked over his shoulder at the open door. A spider crawled along the jamb, and somewhere down the stairs, he heard Jolly snickering. He turned back to Milo and smiled. "Let me borrow that flamethrower, and I'll throw in cookies so special that only elves have ever tasted them."
There's more scares where that came from. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Ray watched the jellied petroleum burn on the cinder block wall with a bemused grin. He blasted the flamethrower down each set of stairs to clear the path until he finally arrived in the basement. A rusted gate stood ajar next to an unmanned security desk. Bare bulbs flickered, casting shadow puppets on the walls. The heavy steel doors of solitary confinement cells were open. Smells drifted down the corridor that made Ray's stomach growl. Someone was cooking burgers. His face paled. They didn't cook burgers in prison basements. It had to be a Christmas request, and if anyone in the hole was requesting delicious, all meat patties. It had to be Robbie Mocker. Vomit hit the back of Ray's teeth, but he choked it back down. Each cell he passed was empty. The aroma grew stronger, and despite knowing that, or who, was in those patties, Ray had to admit that the smell was exquisite. He rounded the corner, his finger tense against the trigger. Sugar Plum Gary shoved an arm into the meat grinder and hopped off the stepladder to work the crank. Ray watched the arm descend into the machine. The process made the hand wave at him as it disappeared and came out the other end in ropey, pink strands that dropped into a bowl. Gary pinched 2 balls of the meat and smashed them onto an electric griddle. He slapped cheese on a pair that were already cooking. The toaster popped noisily, almost causing Ray to torch the makeshift kitchen, prematurely. Gary, who sucked at everything, was a short-order savant. "Hurry up out there," Candy Pane barked from the last cell on the left. "He's still hungry." "Order up," Gary declared happily. "Then bring it here, Gary. It's not a present if you don't deliver it." Ray whistled. Gary turned and dropped the burger. The lights went out and Ray pulled the trigger, filling the hallway with fire and smell of burning gingerbread. Gary's immolated body bounced off the walls before collapsing, next to the table. Through the flickering flames, Ray saw the unnatural smile hiding in the dark. Mr. Jolly unfolded himself from the tight space, his legs stepping over his torso like a spider before he stood upright. Wasps crawled along his lips. Ray raised the flamethrower. "I brought my bug spray this time, Pally. You ever been burned alive? I have. It sucks. And as much as it would jingle my bells to find out how flammable you are, I got some more pressing issues." "Don't you want to smile, Ray?" the king asked. "You could smile forever." "I will be after I kill you, but let's stick a pin in that, just for now." "When you want to play, just sing." Mr. Jolly sank into the shadows. "Sing for the king, the most wicked thing." Ray let the flamethrower fall to the floor and stepped into the doorway of the kinder cannibal's cell. The obese child used his fingers to force the last bite of burger into his overstuffed mouth. "Is that enough?" Candy Pane asked. "Are you satisfied now? Have I granted you the buffet you most wanted for Christmas?" Robbie shook his head, and his cheeks kept moving afterwards. He was in kindergarten when he realized he liked the taste of people. Then one day in 3rd grade, he decided to turn his class into a goddamn Denny's. At his trial, he said people whose names end in vowel sounds taste better. Ray knocked on the door as he entered the tiny room. "You'll never get away with this," Ray snickered. "Get it? Yule? Yeah, you never did have a sense of humor." "I knew he'd send you," Candy Pane said. "If I give the naughtiest kids the presents they want the most, then this whole system burns. Without Santa, humans will destroy themselves through their own avarice." Ray tapped his ear. "Do you hear that?" "The sleigh bells?" Payne scoffed. "I know your corny lines as well as I know your tactics. I got some mistletoe hanging off my belt. How about you kiss me under it?" Ray pointed at the ceiling. "The storm's over, dipshit. Santa's giving naughty kids presents too, because you're right. Humans are greedy. And you're jealous of that." Candy Pane rose from the bunk. His hand moved to his dagger. "When you put love into things instead of people, it becomes greed. Christmas has shown us that, but it's shown us what they can do when they love each other too." Ray drew his knife. "For all we've got going for us, elves can't love." "You're wrong, because I'm going to love gutting you, Ray." "Ray?" Robbie muttered in a spew of crumbs. "A sound!" The cannibal scurried through the discarded leftovers and clamped his teeth into Ray's leg. He chewed the muscle until he gnawed deep enough for a good, solid bite, and jerked his head back with a hunk of elf meat oozing between his lips. "Yummy," Robbie said as he chewed. "I want more. I want elf burgers for Christmas." Ray limped out of the room. He tried to think of a plan that didn't involve stabbing the kid in the face, but it was the most appealing option. Gingerbread wafted to his schnoz. Ray looked at the knife in his hand. In his very long life, he'd never known Mrs. Claus to be wrong about anything. He hobbled to Gary's burnt corpse and collapsed next to it. He cut away a slab of blackened muscle and tossed it onto a single paper plate. Ray held the plate up as the kinder cannibal sprang on him once more. "Merry Christmas!" he squeaked. Robbie snatched the plate from him and sniffed it. "I want burgers." "That is better than burgers," Ray said. That's a Gary meal." "Gary?" Robbie accented the vowel sound and took a bite. "Gary meal is yummy too. Seasoned with my secret blend of herbs and napalm." Ray snapped off one of Gary's ribs and got to his feet. "Every Gary meal comes with a prize too." Ray worked at the bone with his dagger, putting his elven toy-making abilities to task as he quickly whittled it into a figure. He stretched to hand it to Robbie. "All kids deserve toys for Christmas, and that is special because it's just for you. It's a limited edition." "What is it?" Robbie asked. "It's a superhero." "Looks like a fish." "That's because it's Aquaman." Ray rolled his eyes. "Look, Pally, last year I would have just killed you, so shitty action figures are a step up. Now how about you go back to your room and I'll make you another Gary meal." "You're fucking dead!" Candy Pane charged down the hall, springing off Robbie's back and launching himself into the air with his dagger cocked back. The light glinted on the serrated teeth of the blade. Ray jumped back, narrowly dodging the attack. Pain slashed for Ray's throat. A spray of indigo blood drenched both elves' faces. Ray twisted his dagger and pulled it free. "Guess you don't know my tactics that well after all, Candy Andy." Ray let the elf fall. Robbie crawled to him. "Candy Andy," he accented the final sound of each word. "Double yum." Andy's gurgling screams echoed down the halls as the kinder cannibal dragged the elf to his cell for a late-night snack. Ray listened to the begging until it was replaced with noisy chewing. He pursed his lips and nodded. "Merry Christmas, Pally!" Ray limped around a pool of shadow and locked the cell. "And to all, a good night." Inner Rage by Rob Fields. Chapter 1. Christmas Eve is here again. Only this year, and the many others that follow, I'll be spending it at Glenview Correctional Facility, which is located just a short drive from North Ridgeway. This place has been my home ever since I turned myself in, shortly after bringing down the Queen of Hearts serial killer. You see, I was also a serial killer, known as the Angel of Death. Keep in mind, I never referred to myself as that. It was simply what the media called me, mainly because I only killed people who, I believe, deserved to die, like high-profile criminals and other serial killers. I might still be a serial killer today if I hadn't met Detective Hnrique Couto. Drake seemingly came to Strickfield, where I was attending university at the time, to fill a detective opening that his uncle had in the police department. In truth, Drake was in Strickfield to find and capture me. Drake had done much homework and determined I was in that very village. Shortly after he arrived at the station, I showed up at the request of Chief Jeffrey Couto. I was a police intern and assigned to Drake. I believe it was right then and there that Drake fell madly in love with me, At the time, I couldn't feel emotions, but I knew there was an ulterior motive for his being in Strickfield. As Drake mentored me during my off-campus hours, I decided to take my mentor as my new mate and applied myself to being his perfect girlfriend. Little did he realize that the serial killer he was looking for was right under his nose and in his bed. Why was Drake determined to capture me? Years ago, during my time in high school, I had killed a former North Ridgeway High teacher named Annie Judge. She was prostituting herself and selling drugs to my fellow students, even underage kids. When a girl turned up missing and I discovered she was dead, I trapped Annie Judge and ended her. Little did I realize that this particular kill would come back to haunt me in the form of Drake, who was Annie's former lover. Maybe Drake wanted to fall in love with me, and maybe he didn't. I've never asked him this. Even though I was putting myself in danger of him discovering me being a serial killer, I chose to be with him knowing that he was a good man. Choosing to remain with Drake was what ultimately became my undoing as a serial killer. Drake loved me so much that he wanted to marry me, to which I accepted his proposal. The Queen of Hearts killer had a personal vendetta with me and let me know she wanted to finish a prior conflict from before. I was ready to kill Rigby Brewster, the Queen of Hearts, but Drake begged and pleaded with me not to end her. It was in that one moment that he took me in his arms and kissed me. It was that one magical moment, that one triggering event I waited my whole life for. Drake had finally caused me to feel the very emotions I had longed for. In that moment, I knew I loved Drake the same way he loved me. Even though Drake had finally found the person who had killed Annie Judge, he couldn't forsake me. He still wanted to marry me. I can swear by it that Drake is one of the most honest cops you'll ever meet. He was always by the book on everything, even when he was mentoring me in my university years. But this one time, Drake was willing to look the other way. Not just because he loved me, but because I never killed innocent people or children. The problem with that, however, was that my new emotions came back on me. I had a horrible nightmare of me killing some random person the way I've done so many hundreds of killers and criminals before. That was when I told Drake to arrest me. Even though it hurt him deep to have to do it, he read me my rights and took me to the station. I confessed to being the angel of death to Chief Kaczmarek. I was found guilty at my trial and sentenced to life here at the Glenview Correctional Facility. However, I wouldn't be placed with the general population. My mama, Detective Chantel Devereaux, and Drake both had influence on the count of their reputations as detectives and went to bat for me. It was decided that I could have certain privileges in return for my services. I would help solve cases when they were presented to me. Because of my highly photographic memory, I was a great service in this aspect. Plus, I think like a killer. I'm in my very own special cell, which gives me many of the comforts of home. It's kind of like having a little apartment, except I can't always come and go when I please. I do get to go outside, but I'm all by myself, and am constantly watched by the guards. Mama and Drake can both come visit me anytime they want. I've even had visits from both Chief Kaczmarek and Chief Montgomery Cobbs, my mom's boss. You'd think I'd be regretting turning myself in. Here's the irony, though. I don't. I've been at peace ever since I got locked up. The only thing that really hurts is Drake. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many times I've told him to forget about me and find someone else who would be better suited for him. But he will not turn away from me. In fact, he still wants to marry me, even though I'm in Glenview, For the rest of my life, Drake still won't give me up. Every so often, he proposes to me again and wants to give me back my engagement ring that I returned to him once he arrested me. My problem here is that Drake challenges me to look him in the eyes and tell him I want him out of my life. If I can just tell him that, he'll respect my wishes and never come back. But every time I try, I burst into tears and clutch him to me. Mama told me that you can't just turn emotions on and off. I hate when she's right. So Drake and I are still together. Like I said, it's Christmas Eve. I'm sitting in my cell visiting with Mama. She's proud of me for having helped solve some heavy cases in the last month. Unfortunately, Mama won't be able to spend the night with me since she's on duty. She said she'd be back in the afternoon for Christmas. I told her I'd be okay since Drake was coming and would be spending the night with me. After Mama and I wish each other Merry Christmas, she leaves. Now it's just me and the guard at her station. Chapter 2. Chessie Carver has been one of the guards assigned to sit outside my cell since I was first placed in here. At first, she didn't know what to make of me, but in time we started talking to each other. We came to build trust and understanding between us. In fact, it's getting close to the evening when Drake shows up and sees us playing chess. When he sees me pondering my next move, he asks me if I'm okay. I look up at him. This is what I get for teaching Chessie everything I know about chess. Drake watches us finish our game. Chessie beats me, barely. After I congratulate her on a game well played, she leaves my cell and returns to her station. Of course, she locks Drake and I in. Drake again makes my emotions rise when he lays a huge bag of Denoyer's Grill down on the table. I told you I'd bring you something wonderful for dinner, Drake reminds me. I start to cry a little when I smell those delicious pancakes. And the burgers. Wow, everything's still warm. You must have floored it from Denoyer's all the way here. What did you do, turn on the siren when you left there? Drake laughs. No, actually, there weren't too many people on the road on Christmas Eve. I look at the clock and see it's around 6. By now, many people are probably home or with family and friends to enjoy Christmas Eve. Having Drake here with me makes me glad I don't have to spend tonight or tomorrow alone. Before, I never really cared whether I was alone or not. Not when I didn't have feelings. You okay, Rage? Drake asks. Yeah, I quickly reply. I'm fine. We look at each other for a little bit. Then Drake moves and sets the table. When he's done, he's laid out a nice feast of breakfast and dinner foods. Dig in, Drake invites me. Chessie gets up and leaves for a little bit. Normally, she's not supposed to do that, but she kind of makes it a point when Drake and I are together like this. She's heard us talking to each other before and hasn't heard anything taboo. She's even been there when we've made out. I've even told her I'm not the least bit bothered by her. Still, she gives us alone time, at times. Drake and I have our Denoyer's Grill feast and talk about whatever. Drake again thanks me for all I do with helping the police force, in spite of my current situation. Drake and I finish eating. I clear off the table and throw away the trash. Before I can sit down, Drake takes hold of my wrist and eases me to sit on his lap. We look at each other for a long moment before we have some kisses. Since Drake will be spending the night with me tonight, I can't wait until we can be intimate. The more we kiss, the more I'm finding it hard to be able to wait. Eventually, we do stop, so we can catch our breaths. I love you, he tells me. I close my eyes and bow my head a little. I still say you could do so much better than me. He puts his finger under my chin and raises my head back up. I open my eyes and look into his. Just tell me to my face. Just say it and mean it. and I'll leave you right now. Once again, he's challenging me. I don't even get to have another attempt when I feel the tears on my face. When Drake holds me, I can't help holding him back. You deserve better, I persist. When I finish crying, Drake has the engagement ring out again. Again, I try to tell Drake to leave me and never look back, but the tears come more than ever. It hurts more and more each time, thinking of a life without Drake. I don't care that you're in here, Rage, Drake tells me again, like he's told me so many times before. I can come see you whenever I want. I can even stay with you. We should be living together in our own place, not here in prison, I tell him. I don't care where we are, he insists. You'll always have me in your life. I'm never letting you go. I quickly get off Drake's lap and tighten my fists. But what will your family say about you marrying a serial killer? I told you how many lives I've taken. Drake gets up to confront me. I don't care what my family says. I only care about you. I really tighten my fists now. I won't let you throw away your life on me, Drake. I feel myself really shaking now. I'm practically sobbing. Just as I'm about to scream for him to leave me, I fall to my knees. Drake lowers himself and comforts me, as he's also done so many times before. Am I really so scared of losing him? Yes. I'm reminded of that again when we're kissing. I can't wait any longer. It's when I hear Chessie fastening the locks on my cell that she knows we need our alone time. It's once we hear her leave and lock that door behind her that we quickly work to get each other's clothes off.
You're not safe yet. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Chapter 3. Drake and I are spooned up together under the covers and watching TV. I can't help looking at the engagement ring again. He placed it on my finger and challenged me to take it off. It feels so wrong on so many levels, but at the same time, I know I can never remove it. I know I truly belong to him. You're going straight to hell with me, I tell him. You know that, right? If that's where we're getting married, then I accept, he tells me. We kiss again, then we get dressed and sit with each other. After a time, Chessie comes back in and unlocks my cell. When I look to her for an explanation, she reminds me that I'm allowed my time to leave my cell. Drake's allowed to take me to the rooms designated my free spaces. While other prisoners here can access these rooms during their times, they're not supposed to know when I'm even here. That's why I have my own private area and don't have a cellmate. Also, I can access rooms like the library because the other prisoners are locked up for the night. As long as Drake or Mama's with me, a guard doesn't always have to be. Drake and I head into the library and sit. Again, he tells me he wants to marry me. I tell him he knows my answer since I can't bring myself to remove the ring. I look at it again. I'll go straight to hell with you, he promises me, taking and holding my hands. Nothing is ever going to separate us, not even this prison. I squeeze his hands back. I truly do want better for him, but my emotions won't let me lose him. I love him way too much. However, Drake and I were about to have our love put to the test this very night. The test was about to start once we got up and started walking around the safe rooms again. We walk out into one of the hallways and head to the little theater. We go in and head up to the projection booth to see what we can watch together. Drake and I have watched movies in here together before. He tells me he's found a good Christmas movie for us to watch and puts it in. As soon as he turns the digital projector on, that's when the terror begins. Chapter 4. Drake reaches me when he sees me bent over the body, of Sherman Biggs near the screen, one of the older guards I got along with. We had many conversations in the library on nights. "Careful, Rage," Drake warns me. "Don't let the other guards here see your—" "You can vouch for me," I remind him quickly. "Look at these." I point to the 2 puncture marks on Sherman's neck. This would explain why the body's pale. When Drake looks at me, I can tell he really doesn't want to believe it. Oh, if Mama saw the look on his face right now, she'd be giving him hell. "Why won't you believe?" I ask. "You've seen vampires for yourself, Drake. Mama and I have both proven to you they're real. You were with us the night we took down Sharanda Thorne. You've seen vampires with your own 2 eyes. Drake seems to be at a loss for words. I groan, annoyed at his continued disbelief. If Mama was here right now, she'd slap you upside the head. Now he's giving me that look. I know Drake's never been comfortable around Mama. He's endured her for my sake. I point to Drake. "You stay close to me." "Stay close to you? You're not even armed, Rage," Drake counters, pulling his gun. He's right. Looking around, I can't pick up any of the chairs and break them for stakes, since they're all metal and attached to the floor. Suddenly, I have an idea. I grab Drake's hand. "Let's go." "Rage!" Drake protests. I lead Drake through one room after another until we come into the chapel. Fortunately, this supposedly holy place is open 24/7. I pull open the door and we both gasp. There's blood all over the altar, from the priest who's hanging from the large cross overshadowing it. "I had a feeling you would come here eventually, Reagan Devereaux," a feminine voice calls out. We look to see the telltale woman getting up from one of the pews and turning to face us. She looks like she's in her early 40s. I can see the facial features and immediately know who this woman is related to. "Yes, you recognize me, do you not?" Then she chuckles. "You remember my daughter, whom you destroyed. Your mother took my son. However, Sharanda was my favorite. Maximilian was a fool. It was no wonder that he died." She points to me. "But you killed my daughter, and I must now rectify that." "By killing you," she smiles wickedly, "and the man you love." She holds her hands outward. "Naturally, you came here to seek weapons to fight us with." When she sees the look on my face, she knows she's got the upper hand. "You did not think I would come to this prison alone. Oh, I will battle with you myself. I just needed my minions to make sure it would be just the 2 of us. There are no other guards here to help you now." She raises her finger. "And you need not worry about the prisoners. They shall remain locked in their cells. Ah, here they are now. Now I see there are other vampires emerging from their hiding places. Their hissing noises and their red eyes tell me Drake and I are going to have our hands full." "Have you taken care of every last guard here?" the Thorn woman asks. "We have," one of them answers. "Excellent." Then she looks back at me. "We shall play a little game, you and I." Suddenly she appears right in front of me and knocks me on my ass. When Drake raises his gun, she snatches it from him and crushes it, much to his horror and disbelief. Next, she grabs Drake and tosses him to her minions. They grab him and keep him with them. When I get up, the woman is in my face now. "I could easily kill you right now, but that would be far too easy. Sharanda would never want me to kill you easily. No, I taught her to be more ruthless than that. Oh, where are my manners? I know your name, but you need to know mine. I believe you must know I am a thorn. But you may call me Naranda." When she sees me looking uneasily at Drake, she turns my attention back to her. You need not worry about your lover, Reagan. She addresses her minions. Under no circumstances are any of you to harm that mortal in any way. He is to be the prize in our contest. Am I understood? When I hear the minions agree to her commands, Naranda turns her attention back to me. Here are the rules of our contest. I shall give you a 15-minute head start. From there, I shall hunt you down myself. My underlings will keep your lover safe and secure. You have until the end of Christmas Eve, just under 3 hours. If you're still alive at the stroke of midnight, or in the unlikely event that you and me, both you and your lover, have earned your freedom and your lives. However, when I find and destroy you, then my reward shall be both vengeance for my daughter, and I shall lay claim to your lover by siring him and making him my new husband. Then Naranda laughs coldly. The fear on both of you is so ripe, I can practically taste it on my own tongue. She points to the clock. Your 15-minute head start begins now. If I were you, Reagan, I'd be taking every advantage of that time. I have no choice. Fortunately, I know enough about Glenview to have an advantage over these blood-sucking freaks. I just know I have to save Drake. I turn around and run out of the chapel. Chapter 5. It doesn't take me long to find some tools to help me. I came across a few of the bodies of the guards. Naranda wasn't lying when she said her minions took them all down. They're all pale, which means they were drained of their blood. I find keys and key cards on the first guard. On the next one, I find a gun and take it. I won't be able to use it against Naranda or any of the other vampires, but it's better to have a gun than have nothing at all. I won't let Naranda take me unarmed. If I go down against her, then I'm going down knowing I was fighting. I've been counting the time in my mind. So far, I haven't seen her. When I come into the gymnasium, I see the big clock on the middle wall, and see Naranda has kept her word. I've got 1 minute left before she'll start pursuing me. I'm shaking as I'm trying to keep my focus. I've never gotten used to the feeling of fear. I hate to admit it, but I'm really scared. I'm scared that Naranda will kill me, but I'm more afraid she'll make good on her promise to Drake. The 15 minutes are up now. Naranda lets me know when I hear the long, shrill whistle. Hard to believe that vampire kept her word. I'll have to consider the possibility that she may be a master vampire. If she is, then I'll have to both stake her and cut her head off. Then I remember telling Drake how Mama would have slapped him upside the head for his disbelief. Mama would give me hell if she knew I wasn't thinking straight and not calling upon the lessons about vampires and other supernatural beings she taught me. No, Mama's not going to find my dead body. I'm not going to let Mama down again. Not like this. Mama taught me better than that. I'm not going to let the man I love down either. I may not have the bloodlust anymore, but that doesn't count against vampires. They're already dead. I still have my highly photographic memory. I still remember each and every kill I've ever done, how they died, what date, and what I destroyed them for. I remember everything Mama taught me regarding the supernatural. My mind is how I'll destroy you, Naranda. Just as I'm contemplating a plan, I hear some clacking on the floor as I reach the end of a long hall. I turn and see a large wolf looking right at me. And no, it's Naranda. She changed into a wolf and tracked me down by my scent. The wolf growls and runs swiftly towards me. I'm ready to turn and run. But I don't have to, do I? In that moment, I lose my fear and look right at Naranda as she's closing the gap between us. I've got grim determination now and know how I'm winning this round. That's it, Queenie. Just keep on coming. I'll show you how I've dealt with bad dogs. In fact, a very bad dog was my first kill. A very bad dog was how I learned I was a serial killer. Just as Naranda is ready to leap up and at me, I drop my gun and suddenly snatch her and drive her right to the floor. Just as quickly, she springs back to her feet and bites me on the wrist. Even though I no longer have my bloodlust, I still feel very little pain. This is a double-edged sword for me. I just told you the positive side. The negative is that I can become injured and not know it, which means I can potentially bleed to death. Now I'm mad. Wow, I really love being mad. I'm wishing I could have felt this emotion much sooner. I'm so mad right now that I roar and kick Naranda hard in her chest, enough to make her break her hold on my wrist. While she's stunned, I lower myself to take hold of the back of her head and her muzzle and snap her head hard enough to hear her neck break. Naranda yelps and goes limp. No, I haven't defeated her, but I have temporarily stunned her and bought myself a little time. I spring and slide the door shut before I run again. I know these doors are sealed enough to prevent smoke from penetrating them, which happened many years ago when prisoners got loose and rioted. This was long before I was born, by the way. Also, Mama was at university and wasn't in North Ridgeway around that time. I'm already concocting another plan and am finalizing the details when I hear the sliding door give way. Naranda had to have returned to her human form after she healed from her neck injury. She either snapped the locks on the sliding door or she warped past it. As long as Naranda can't see me, she can't warp right to me. Unfortunately, turning off all the lights won't help me, since she has vampire vision. I hear clacking on the floor again, and know she's returned to her wolf form, likely tracking my blood this time. Precisely what I was counting on. In fact, Naranda, I already know how I'm going to defeat you, at least. Yes, you kept your word by giving me a 15-minute head start that you promised, but that doesn't mean you'll keep your word about releasing Drake when I defeat you. And trust me when I say, your punishment shall most certainly fit the crime. Like I said, you're dead. Even though I no longer have my insistent bloodlust commanding me to take lives from before, I don't have to feel guilty about killing you, since you're not alive. But in order for me to accomplish my objective and defeat you and your minions, I have to get to one specific area of the prison. It'll be there where we finish our game. I run down a couple flights of stairs to get to the ground floor and head to the laundry room. When I get inside, I quickly remove my clothes, underwear too. First, I take care of my bites by rinsing them out and using clean cloths to bandage them. Now I grab some dirty clothes out of one of the wash piles and quickly put them on. These clothes really stink, but they may be enough to conceal my own scent. After slipping my feet into shoes I find, I get out of the laundry room and resume my destination. A few moments later, I hear a loud, shrill scream. Sounds to me like Naranda's lost my scent. I know I can't gloat too much. Naranda knows other ways she can pick me up again. She's been a vampire for far too long to not have other means of detection, including picking up the smell of my blood again.
Are you afraid? Good. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Chapter 6. I'm proven right when I go to cross through another hallway. I'm about to shut that sliding door behind me when I feel Naranda's close. Suddenly, the door comes flying away. Naranda gasps with either happiness that I'm giving her a challenge or that she's finally caught up to me. Who can say? Please do not make this easy for me, Reagan, she says. I still wish to have fun with you. She licks her lips. And your blood tastes just delicious. I was hoping I wouldn't have to use these yet, I tell her, but you're not leaving me with much choice. I step up to her. As she's putting her hands on my arms, I grab the neck of her form-fitting dress and pull it open to drop what's in my hand inside. Naranda shrieks and screams when she feels the holy wafers I managed to snap up at the bloody altar burning her flesh. Both her skin and the gown are aflame. Since she's going to have to sort that out, I've got time to run again. I don't know how much time I'm going to have before Naranda will be back to hunting me again. I can see the blood from my wrist soaking through my makeshift bandage. She'll smell that again and easily pick up the trail. Also, since she got close enough to me, she'll know the scent of these stinky clothes. Fortunately, I'm almost where I need to get to. I reach the women's shower room. Before I go in, I quickly get naked and turn on the water to hear all the nozzles fire up at once. I walk inside and stand underneath a spray of steamy water at the back center when Naranda enters and sees me. Oh, the look of confusion on her face. "What is the meaning of this, Reagan?" she asks. Then she smirks. Are you offering yourself to me to save your lover? Is that what you really think? I murmur, running my hands from the front to the rear of my long, wet, dirty blonde hair. She's really confused now when I raise my finger for her to see. Next, I move my finger to my neck and trace down in between my large breasts, all the way to my belly button. Then I trace my finger across my skin, just underneath my breasts. The water continues to spray down on me as I just stand there and wait for her. I'm all yours, Naranda, I tell her. All you have to do is just join me in the shower. Then I smirk. If you can. She's still not sure what I've got in mind, but she walks towards me. The showers are wetting her down. It's when she starts to come under my spray that she suddenly cries out in pain and hisses as she gets away from me. What is this? She demands. Then she tries to come and grab me again. Like before, her skin burns when the water spraying from my nozzle touches her. As for me, I'm fine. The water's warm to hot, but not burning me in the slightest. In fact, the water feels very relaxing. Naranda tries grabbing me a couple more times. In determination, she warps behind me and wraps her arms around me. I cry out when she sinks her fangs into me again, this time at my shoulder. She holds on for as long as she can as she drinks from me. I can actually feel the pain of her fangs in my flesh. But why does this feel so wonderful? I think I love pain. Naranda can't hold on to me anymore since she's in way more pain from the water than what she's giving me. She finally lets go and warps away from my shower spray. Shit, I'm bleeding again. Naranda glares at me now. Much to my surprise, she's not the least bit angry with me. Yes, you are giving me quite the challenge, Reagan Devereaux. She licks her lips. Your blood is so incredibly delicious. I think I may just keep you and drink from you on special occasions. Perhaps you shall be the special reserve label blood I drink after I marry your man. I can see the steam coming off of her burning skin. How are you able to be safe from me under your shower? It's not this shower alone, I inform her. It's any shower I happen to stand underneath. I start to close up my chosen vampire trap when I leave the nozzle I'm under and move to another. See for yourself. Naranda cautiously moves to the nozzle I was underneath. Sure enough, her skin's not burning under that spray now. Yet she comes too close to the spray I'm now underneath, and her skin is burning again. She curses me, but is oddly happy at the same time. I quickly move to the shower entrance where there are two heavy spraying nozzles. I squat down and make the sign of the cross on the floors there. I make my way around to each of the other sprays and make the same sign underneath them. Naranda tries to stop me, but has to keep away since the water spraying on me is deadly to her. You think you can just seal me in here like this? Naranda yells. Exactly, I tell her. Every shower nozzle in here is deadly holy water to you now. In fact, I even disinfected my wounds with it. You hurt me, Naranda, but I'm sure my pain's nowhere near to what you're feeling right now. In fact, I don't even think you could turn into mist to be able to escape my trap. Naranda falls to her knees. She's not directly under the nozzles, but the steam is too much for her. Her skin is as red as a lobster's shell. She tries to change into a wolf, then a bat. She howls with pain before she returns to her human form and falls flat on her face and chest on the floor. Now, it's time to prepare her, for old time's sake. Chapter 7. Naranda wakes up and finds herself secured to a table in the infirmary. She tries to sit up but finds she can't move. Like your daughter before you, I've bound you with a crucifix, I tell her. You're mine now. Naranda is still badly burned from being in holy water showers with me. As for me, I'm dry now, aside from my hair. She looks up at me now. Like Sharonda Thorne before her, she tries using her glam on me. Then she sees my eyes glowing red the way Sharonda and so many of my other victims before her have seen. What are you? Naranda demands. You cannot possibly be a human woman. I can feel your evil emitting from your very eyes. I wonder if I'll ever understand why my victims think I'm so evil. And then I put my hands on the pit of my stomach and feel my familiar passenger. I moan softly, knowing my bloodlust has returned. Coupled with my new emotions, it feels just amazing. I want more than anything to put Naranda to death and claim her. Now Naranda sees the plaques displaying the pictures of the dead guards I found. You and your minions have killed these people. Many of them had families who loved them a great deal. I understand your vile nature as a vampire, but in my eyes, you're all vicious murderers. You even tried to take my love from me. Regardless of whether you ever planned on keeping your word and letting him go, I will not be letting you go. Like your daughter before you, you're going to die by my hands very shortly. Naranda opens her mouth to show her fangs. My family will never stop coming for you, Regan Devereaux. If you kill me here today, you will have enemies at every turn. The House of Thorn is a great one. Allow me to live and I shall bring you into my house. You would be greatly worshipped for your abilities as a prolific killer alone. I consider her a moment. Then I tell her, perhaps if you would have approached me years ago, when I was a child and raised me yourself, I might have been as your offering. But I was raised by a good and wonderful person who taught me to be a good girl and instilled her values in me. She even taught me her ways of dealing with your kind. I can never take innocence. I just can't do it. No. You will die here today. If your family comes for me, then they come for me. None of us will live forever, nor are we promised tomorrow. You are a fool to refuse my offer, Regan, Naranda yells. A fool! But today, you're the fool, I remind her. Or have you suddenly forgotten what I'm about to do to you? I reach over to my instruments and pick up one of the sharp wooden stakes I made. And now, Naranda Thorne. Let the punishment fit the crime. When I raise the stake, she yells for me to stop. I do, for a moment. Then she asks me how I was able to make those showers spray holy water. She tells me I must at least tell her that. But I don't, and bring the stake right down hard and fast. Naranda screams when the stake pierces her heart from the front to the back. I wait until she finally dies. However, her body doesn't immediately start burning into ash, which means Naranda Thorne had lived long enough to become a master vampire. I pick up the blade I made in the maintenance shop a block away and use it to decapitate her. I grab her hair and lift her head up high. Feeling both my emotions and my bloodlust together, I've never been more excited. I've just killed my first ever master vampire. Mama will be so proud of me. I think I'm even crying with joy now. So, how did I make the shower spray holy water? Well, when I turned 18, Mama had me do something really strange. She made me sign up online to become an ordained minister. Mama and I don't believe in the existence of God or Satan, but she explained that using artifacts of the holy and being a minister doesn't mean faith in God. It means believing that these weapons can protect you against the beings who are vulnerable to them. Now, do you understand? I simply blessed myself and the spots on the floor in the shower to turn the water holy. Like I said, Mama taught baby well. But today I learned a valuable lesson that the master vampire I just killed taught me before I ended her. I know what I need to do now. It's time for me to go find Drake and show Naranda's minions that she's lost our contest. After placing Naranda's body in the incinerator, I gathered the stakes I made, armed myself with a few crosses, and pocketed several bottles of holy water. I'll go down fighting if that's what those vampires want. I secure Naranda's head and carry it in my hand. I'm coming for you, Drake.
Did you hear that? Better check the locks on your doors. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Chapter 8. You're never going to believe this. I returned to the chapel ready for the fight of my life. I was truly ready to die to save Drake. I came into the chapel and held up Naranda's head for her minions to see. Your master is mine, I yelled. Honor the bargain and let Drake go, or come out here and fight me yourselves to keep him. My bloodlust is really hungry for more vampires, but it would not get any more today. The bodies of Naranda's minions, or rather their ashen remains, are everywhere. I do find Drake behind the altar unconscious. I check him over and see he's not bitten, even using a mirror to see his reflection. Knowing he wasn't sired, I shake him awake. As he struggles to come to, I know that he was glammed. I look around to see if there are any other vampires waiting to attack. But they don't. Rage? Drake utters. Are you all right? I ask, helping him to his feet. Drake gasps when he sees Naranda's head on the altar. Then he sees the look on my face and knows what I'm about to say isn't going to be good. Rage? He utters again. I look him in the eyes. I'm not going to marry you, Drake. In fact, it's over between you and me. I really do mean it this time. I remove the engagement ring and place it in his hand. But Rage, he stammers. He doesn't see me cry like I've done many times before when I couldn't allow myself to be separated from him. Go and live your life, Drake Kazmarak, I tell him. I'm going to be in this prison for the rest of my natural life, and that's not fair to you. While you were able to come and visit me here and even spend nights with me, you can't ultimately live here with me. Ultimately, you won't want to live with me. I've taken far too many lives. I don't even know if I'm human or not. I just killed this master vampire and I loved it. I step away from Drake. I mean it. Leave here now and go live your life. Find yourself another mate to be happy with. All I'll ever bring you is misery. You may not think so now, but over time, you're going to wish you'd never met me. Or did you forget why you came looking for me in the first place? I tighten my fists and scream. I killed Annie Judge! Now Drake is finally looking at me the way I knew he would. I can see some contempt on his face. I killed Annie Judge, I repeat. I will never regret killing her, Drake. You and I both know why she deserved to die. In fact, I will never regret killing any of my victims. I grab and raise Naranda's head again. including this master vampire. I glare at him now. He gasps when he sees how red my eyes have become. Don't you understand? I'll never be your perfect mate. I'll never be a normal woman, and you deserve so much better than me. I put the head back on the altar. I release you, Drake. Go and live the rest of your life. Hopefully you'll be able to find someone who can truly make you happy. You're a good man, but I am not a good woman. I told you a long time ago that I'm damaged and can never be made whole again. Leave me now and never return here to see me ever again. In fact, I will leave instructions that you are banned from seeing me, unless it's for a case you absolutely need my help on. Drake doesn't say anything to me. I know I've hurt him again. I know I hurt him deep when I killed Annie Judge, but this will likely hurt him just as deep. In time, he will heal. I follow behind him where I can see him, and he can't see me. I watch from an open door as he gets into his car and leaves. Wow, I left him so distraught that he completely forgot. I can easily walk out of Glenview altogether. I could literally be a free woman this very night. Or rather, Christmas Day, as the nearby clock strikes midnight. I know I have the skills to be able to stay on the run and avoid law enforcement. I could even leave the country and live somewhere free of this place's rules. The ironic truth here is, however, that I really don't want to go. I know I've done wrong, in spite of the fact I've saved so many lives and claimed so many corrupt souls. The truth is, I still continue to feel very much at peace here. It's then when it begins to snow. I stand in the doorway and watch it come down. The Christmas lights that line the fence aren't the prettiest to look at, but I'll take it. Suddenly, I feel somebody near me. I turn and see Chessie Carver. "Reagan?" she utters. She and I look at each other. I'm so overjoyed that she's okay. Looks like she probably got knocked out. Chessie sees I can easily escape Glenview. She doesn't even have her gun on her. She has her belt, but no gun. Chessie gives me a beckoning look. "Please do the right thing, Reagan. Don't escape." I give her a warm smile and approach her. I think she's wondering if I'm going to kill her, but I wrap my arms around her. Then I feel her hug me back. "I just wanted to see the snow," I tell her. "It's Christmas now. I'm so glad you're all right." We hug for a moment, then we come apart. Chessie seems more confident in me now. "Want to take me back to my block?" I ask. "I promise I won't fight you." Chessie nods. I hold out my hands for her to cuff me, but she takes my hand. We walk back to my block where I let her open my special cell and watch me go back inside. It's only minutes after she locks me up that the state police finally arrive. Chessie tells them everything she knows. Seeing I'm in my cell, they don't even question me. As for Drake, no one ever knew he was there during Naranda's raid. It's 1 week later, New Year's Eve. Chessie actually agreed to sit at her station and watch me tonight. She could have gone to be with her family and friends to watch the ball drop or whatever people do to ring in the new year. Mama was already here and we spent the day together. As for Christmas Eve, she got the full story from me on what happened. Like I said, she was very proud of me for slaying my first master vampire. She was even more proud of me for not escaping here, when I had the chance. She said I was truly a good girl, and that she raised me right, in spite of the fact I was a serial killer. She was still sad and wondering where she went wrong with me on that. I assured her it was nothing she did. She also said she was very sorry for what happened between Drake and I. Speaking of Drake, he hasn't been back here since Christmas Eve. Aside from Mama, the only visitor I got was Chief Cobbs from the North Ridgeway PD. He had a case he wanted my help on. Once I cracked it, he thanked me personally. Now I'm here with Chessie. She's not Mama, but she's a motherly woman to me just the same. She later told me that I had saved her daughter's life years ago when a rapist tried to take advantage of her. She told me the name of the man. Yes, I did kill him for that very reason. I didn't admit to it, but Chessie said I didn't have to. She even called me a good girl, too. As Chessie and I are playing another game of chess in my cell, she gets a call at her station phone. I wait while she goes and answers it. Then she looks my way and tells me I have a visitor. She doesn't know who it is and asks if I want to see the young woman waiting for me. Who would come to visit me on New Year's Eve? I wonder out loud. Then I nod and tell Chessie it may be a law enforcement official with another case for me to work on. Chessie confirms the meeting as I come out of my cell to walk with her. Chessie takes me to the room where I get my cases, but it's not any kind of law enforcement person that I've ever seen. It's a girl who looks to be either 17 or 18. She's very skinny and has long blonde hair. Then I see her red eyes and know immediately that she's a vampire. I turn to Chessie and nod once. I'll be okay. Chessie nods once herself and leaves, locking the door behind me. Then I sit down across from this vampire. Reagan Devereaux, right? She asks me. Or do you prefer Rage? Rage is fine, I reply. The girl smiles. My name's Bella Tabon. I'd like it very much if we could have ourselves a friendly chat. Well, my spookies, the holiday season is nearing its close. But don't worry, there's plenty of fear and fun waiting for you right here. So make sure you're subscribed, and thank you so much for all the support, all the love, and all the fear we get to share. It really does mean a lot to me, and it adds a lot to my own holiday season. So make sure you're subscribed and head to weeklyspooky.com if you want to throw us some support. But for now, stay warm.